Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the D in WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the movie of what if All for One tried to steal Deku's body. All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Chapter 1, Possession or Vessel for Something Greater. I'm sorry, Izuku. Those weren't the words he needed to hear. Izuku Midoriya had, like many kids nowadays, dreamed of being a hero. He had dreamed of saving lives with a smile on his face with his best friend. But alas, some dreams are never meant to be. This did, however, give me an opportunity which I could not pass up. A young boy sitting on a bench alone, covered in burns and explosion markings. Somehow no one had come to check on the poor quirkless greenette while he was crying, holding the last remnants of his dreams, a book filled with details on quirks and heroes. About to tear it apart, he pauses when a man asks him a simple question. "Are you alright, kid?" Izuku looks up to see a white-haired gentleman in a plain black work suit with red eyes who seemed older than they should. The man bends down to meet Izuku's eyes to repeat his question. "Are you alright?" Izuku sniffles and wipes his eyes as he responds. "Why yeah, I'm fine. Just messing around with my friends." The man frowns. "Did your friends ruin your clothes and leave you hurt and crying?" Izuku looks down, not meeting the man's eyes. "They were only showing off their quirks. It's not like they meant it." The man sighs and places a hand on the boy's green and bushy hair, causing a light glow. "They don't sound like particularly good friends if they left you alone after that. This should make the stinging go away." The faint reddish-black glow caused Izuku's light wounds to fade to nothing. With a light start, the boy looks up and immediately smiles, fascinated by the man's quirk. "Wow, that's so cool. You can heal people, sir." "Thank you." The man chuckles and rubs the boy's head a bit. "Yes, I can. It helps when there's someone I wish to help." The boy's eyes light up as he asks, "Are you a hero, mister?" "No, kid, I'm not. I'm just an old man with a strong quirk." "How about you? You seem to like heroes a lot by the looks of it." The man smirks gently and motioned to the book the boy had been about to destroy. I wanted to be one, but I didn't get a quirk." The boy clutches the book and drops his head once more, starting to sniffle again. "That's too bad. Few kids would have notebooks about that kind of stuff. I bet you'd have made a great hero." The man comforts the child, moving to sit down next to him and rub his back as he begins to cry once more. "What's your name, son?" "Midoriya." "Izuku," the boy says between sniffles, starting to calm down due to the man's gentle comforting. "Well, little Midoriya, why do you want to be a hero? Plenty of jobs save people. You could be a doctor, a firefighter, or a police officer, or even a quirk counselor. Why hero?" The man continues trying to talk with the boy, keeping the boy's mind from sad thoughts. "I wanted to be able to save people with a smile, like All Might does, to tell them that everything is gonna be okay. I'm here." The man winces at first, but as if a ghost had haunted him, he sees the boy with white hair like his, hunched over, the memory bittersweet in his mind. "That sounds a lot like my little brother, a powerful sense of justice and empathy. I don't think you're wrong to want that." The man lets out a sigh as he stares into the distance, hand now on the young man's shoulder. "You know, son, I've lived a long life. I've had ups and downs and all the things in between. I know what it's like to lose the thing you treasure most. Some will tell you to move on or give up, but don't let them stop you. I still haven't gotten back what I lost. But you haven't quite lost it yet." The boy raises his head and turns to look at the man, giving a questioning look as the man continues his 1,000-mile stare. "What if I could offer you a chance? A chance to be a hero?" The boy's emerald eyes go wide. The man turns and looks at the boy with a serious expression. "What if I could give you a quirk?" But quirks can't just be given to someone. Everyone knows that," Izuku argues, starting to feel as though he is being messed with. "That's true for most. However, my quirk is special. I can transfer them, give them, take them, much like a hat." The man makes an All Might hat appear out of thin air and puts it on the kid's head. "As you can see, I do have multiple, but the one I'm offering you is my own, my original quirk. Give and take." The kid looks up at the man in shock and awe, the idea changing his worldview significantly. Why would you do that? I'm just a Deku. I don't deserve a cool quirk like that." With a hearty chuckle, the man responds. "Cool, I guess it is. Most think it's terrifying, being able to take a person's quirk away permanently. I don't offer this lightly, young Midoriya. If people find out, you may be hunted for this gift. Imagine all the villains who could want it, not to mention the greedy heroes too." "Greedy heroes and villains." Izuku inches away from the man ever so slightly in fear. "Yes, it is a great and terrible power. But I am done with it. I have lived my life to its fullest, save some regrets. I doubt you could find anyone else to give you an offer like this." The man stares at Izuku, causing the child to gulp instinctively. "But I won't force you. I could, but that would be cruel to you. In the end, it is your life to live." The man stands and begins walking away, turning his head to look at Izuku. "I want to be a hero, so please let me, sir." The boy clenches his fists, the notebook still in hand as he stands. Very little hesitation, a good trait for a hero. And my quirk is your young Midoriya. However, it will be your secret to keep. You do well to hide that aspect just in case. So, I shall give you a second quirk as well. What are your parents' quirks, son? The man exclaims with his arms wide and a grin that could be mistaken for All Might on his face. Mom has telekinesis and dad has fire breath. Izuku struggles to speak the complicated word as he blushes slightly in embarrassment. I do not have a pyrokinesis quirk on hand. Perhaps I can procure one from an elderly man whom cannot use it well. The man begins to mumble under his breath, a trait he had thought he'd gotten rid of, but it seems his theatrics has gotten the better of him. Thank you, sir. I don't even know you yet. You're doing so much for me. Izuku ran up and hugged the man's leg, causing the man to jump slightly in his thoughts. He then pats the child's head. I am only doing what I should. He smiles, but the smile does not reach his eyes. However, the boy doesn't notice this. Mister, what do I call you? Izuku looks up, his emerald eyes pure and innocent. Most I work with call me sensei, but you Izuku may call me Shigaraki. Izuku beams at him, a bright smile across his face. Izuku, I want you to meet me here again once a week. I'll need to transfer the other quirk first and let it settle before my own. Once I give you mine, you likely won't see me again. Why not? Quirks are strange. I fear if I touch you after mine is gone it may jump back to me. Mine is able to transfer quirks, even itself after all. Oh okay. Izuku looks sad once more but manages to smile all the same, his hope returned. Now run along now Izuku. I have some work to do if I am to find you a dummy quirk. The man pushes Izuku away towards the edge of the park. Okay Mr. Shigaraki. Izuku then waves as he runs home, a newfound pep in his step, leaving the villain on his lonesome. The ancient man opens his phone and speaks. Continue observing. Be prepared to retrieve if something goes wrong. I don't want to lose the original. A cruel smile slides across the man's face as he walks away. Inko had noticed a change in her son, like he was a mere month ago. He had been smiling and watching her videos, no longer obsessing over his lack of a quirk. She had felt bad for how she comforted him the other night, but seeing her son happy once more told her that he'd be happy without being a hero. Once a week, he'd ask to visit the park in the afternoon. At first he had come back with ripped clothes, but he assured her it was an accident on his part for getting too close to Katsuki. Her first thought was, Katsuki, what happened to Kaken? Her second was, where'd he get the hat? Every week Izuku would come back from the park in a cheerful mood, sometimes with a bit of All Might merchandise. When she asked about it, she merely got a friend gave it to me. She was happy to hear he'd made a new friend but was concerned that he wouldn't tell her more than that. But seeing him happily placing the items among his collection was one of the sweetest sights she could ask for. About a month and a half he'd come back yelling for her, exclaiming, Mom, look, I got it. I actually got one. Izuku was smiling while he expelled flames from his arms and mouth, soon swallowing them up like some kind of dragon. Inko's eyes went wide in delight, a smile so warm that it felt hot. Wait, no, that was Izuku's flames. Having apparently gotten a mix of her and her husband's quirk, he made his flames move as he expelled them. Perhaps there was some accumulation part to his quirk which meant he hadn't gotten signs of it at first. Izuku's flames were a strange color, almost looking sickly or cursed as they matched his green hair slightly. Quirk, Hydra Flame. This quirk allows the user to expel, control, and consume flames. It is a composite quirk made of several flame eating, flame control, flame storage, and leech flames, allowing the user to heal from eating flames, store flames, control the ones he expels, and leech the vitality of those who are burned from the flames. Chapter 2. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Kaken. It happened. Monday came once more, and with it came school. The young vessel is now able to show his friends his new power. The emerald, green eyes Katsuki knew had changed into slits, a side effect of a mutant gene in one of the composite quirks that made up Hydra Flame, making him look slightly reptilian. The explosion wielder looked annoyed, and a bit put off by Izuku's enthusiasm. What Deku? You find some weird contacts to claim as your quirk. He instantly mocked the boy. Izuku frowned. No, I got my quirk yesterday. Look, Izuku made a small green flame flicker out of his mouth like a lizard's tongue. Katsuki snorted, so you're only able to breathe some weird flames like your dad. Not cool enough to be a top hero like me. Izuku pouted, more flames flickering out of his mouth. This time they were longer, almost finger length, showing how the boy had gotten slightly annoyed by the blonde's comment. It is cool. My flames are way better than your firecrackers. Izuku covered his mouth. An uncharacteristic outburst on his part caused him to insult his best friend. He opened his mouth to apologize but was cut off by an explosion in his face, one that did far less damage than it should have. A spicy taste filled Izuku's mouth, much like spicy curry on a challenge menu. Izuku stuck his tongue as he spoke, trying to get away from the spice. Kaken, that's really spicy. Izuku began to fan his tongue with his hand, much to the shock of the blonde menace. The other kids around them stared at Izuku, expecting him to start crying or be hurt. Soon the silence is broken by a shout. "How do you do that, Deku? What did you do?" The young Bakugo charged at Izuku, tackling him to the floor, grabbing him by the collar as he pinned him. "Kaken, what are you?" Izuku was cut off by the sound of flesh hitting flesh and a sharp pain in his cheek. The taste of blood filled his mouth. Tears began to well up in his eyes as another punch was thrown at him, and another. Soon children began to yell at Bakugo to stop, but only a thought in the back of Izuku's mind kept him conscious. At that moment, the seeds that the ancient villain planted began to grow in Izuku's mind. He didn't defend himself, only staring at the boy who beat him with contempt. Inko and Mitsuki had been called to the principal's office of the elementary school, their sons, after being told of the incident. Mitsuki, seeing her best friend absolutely fuming, caused her to wince and immediately bow an apology. "I'm sorry for my son's actions, Inko. I hadn't expected his IED to get this put of control so soon." Inko only let out a sigh. Seeing her best friend, whom rarely admitted fault, bow caused a bit of her rage to leave her. But only a bit. "Suki, you're my friend, so I take no pleasure in saying this, but you need to get your boy some help. Even if Izu didn't help the situation, beating another kid up out of anger is going to cause lots of trouble for your family and him. I'll be speaking with you about potential bills later. It just depends on how hurt Izuku is." Mitsuki winces as she frowns, looking up to Inko slightly and nodding slowly as she stands up straight. The two parents enter the office and are greeted by a woman with a rotund form and cross-shaped eyes. Light purple hair pulled back in a braid behind her head and a set of glasses sitting low on her nose. She leans forward in her seat to greet the two mothers, Mrs. Bakugo and Mrs. Midoriya. "It's nice to meet you both, even with the circumstances being as they are. I am Reino Asugi, the principal here. As was explained on the phone, your boys got into an argument which led to the fight. Luckily, they didn't use their quirks, both having fairly destructive abilities." Mitsuki cocks her head to the side slightly in confusion. "I thought Izuku was quirkless. Inko, you didn't tell me he manifested his power." Mitsuki gives a bittersweet smile, trying to keep her frustrations with her son from showing. Inko nods, giving a gentle grin. "Izu wanted to show it off at school to Katsuki first." She scratches her cheek in slight embarrassment. "And I couldn't say no to his puppy dog eyes." Mitsuki gives a slight chuckle, knowing how much of a pushover her friend can be when it comes to Izuku. "What'd he get?" "Green flames, a mutation gene giving him lizard-like eyes, and he can eat flames too." I think he leans towards Hisashi's side. "Though my niece Setsuna has some reptilian aspects to her too, so perhaps that comes from my side." Inko brings the finger on her cheek to her chin as she recites and thinks on her son's quirk. "He can eat fire." Mitsuki blinks wildly as the principal clears her throat. Yes, young Midoriya allegedly ate one of Bakugo's explosions, only suffering from a strong spicy flavor as he claims. This led to Bakugo insulting him and Izuku insulting him back, which set off the explosive temper of Bakugo. Bakugo then jumped at Izuku and began pummeling the poor boy. Izuku must have been in shock as he made no move to defend himself. A teacher had to pull Bakugo off Izuku to stop Bakugo. The round principal looks to Inko with a pensive frown. Izuku suffered a few scratches on the inside of his mouth, lost a baby tooth, and likely had a concussion. Our nurse thought it best to put him to sleep with his quirk. Izuku will be fully recovered when he awakes, but he still shouldn't push himself. Inko bites her lower lip and balls her hands into fists, hearing how hurt her baby had gotten. Angry tears threatened to overwhelm her as she slowly spoke to her friend. "Mitsuki, I don't want Bakugo to go near my boy again." Mitsuki could only hang her head at that, unfortunately agreeing that if their sons argued again, things would escalate. "All right, I'll look into some programs for him." Again, Inko, "I'm sorry. I think I'll have Izuku change schools actually. I think a change of pace will be good for him." Inko waved Mitsuki off, deciding to be the one to make a move in response to the potential fallout between their sons. "I shall have the relevant documents put together for you then, Mrs. Midoriya. Do you believe the change will be immediate, or will you wait for the school year to end?" The principal began typing something on her computer, glancing at Inko every once in a while to continue the conversation. Suki, what do you think? Would Bakugo be able to make it till the end of the year without much trouble, or not? I don't mind letting Izu finish his year here, but I'm not going to assume with Bakugo. And I didn't know you in grade school, so I have nothing to go on." Inko did her best to put things politely so not to insult her friend. Her tone, however, betrayed her new feeling towards the youngest Bakugo. However, Mitsuki frowns in thought, mulling over the idea, and speaks hesitantly. "I think he will be able to make it if I impress upon him to leave Izuku alone." Inko looks to the principal and nods, agreeing to stay for the school year. The principal continues typing away, only pausing once she is finished. "I'll still have the documents sent to you in case of another incident. Do let me know if you change your mind." Inko looks to her friend, seeing her struggling with the situation, and decides to move to comfort her. She reaches over, putting a hand on her arm and giving her a gentle smile. I hope you aren't blaming yourself, Suki. Bakugo is still a kid. He has a lot of time to learn control. Unlike you, he has someone who wants to help and not just blame him. Actually, make that 3 people. Mitsuki let out a troubled sigh and put her free hand on Inko's. Thanks, Inkai. Inko turns to the principal once more. Is there anything else we need to know? That covers the incident, however. There is another concern. Apparently, the nurse says Izuku has yet to even show signs of healing, though he has been asleep for an hour. Normally their quirk would be in effect by now. The principal frowns at her screen, rereading the email to be sure she isn't misinterpreting it. Inko's eyebrows raise in concern. What does that mean? Izuku has internal injuries. The principal shakes her head, while Mitsuki clutches her friend's hand harder, a fear that her boy did something worse than they assumed starting to take hold. No, then healing would be taking place. Even if the injuries were internal, the outer injuries would be getting healed at the same time. I'm going to call an ambulance to take your son to the hospital. Perhaps there is something unrelated causing this. While the principal and the 2 parents discussed the situation, a certain doctor made his own preparations. He had been visiting Shizuoka General for the week in order to sell a coincidence. Chapter 3. What makes a monolith last? By nature, a quirkless individual is meant to be quirkless. They aren't particularly built to have them, though those who have quirked parents have a better foundation for it than those without. The appearance of a quirkless individual in a long line of quirks can be theorized as a stabilizer, showing more often in families with particularly powerful quirks. This gap allows the genome to stabilize for at least 10 years before being spread again. This idea was the solution to the quirk singularity theory that Dr. Kyudai Garaki put forth many years ago. It would, however, be shunned in its entirety, which would do no favors to quirkless individuals' life expectancy. Dr. Tsubasa was a renowned geneticist and quirkologist whose home hospital was in Jaku City in the Kyoto Prefecture. He did, however, run children's clinics all over Japan, even making rounds to visit them every few months to keep the quality he strives for in as many as he can. He had taken an appointment due to short staffing, as he claimed, while at one, but this let go a series of events which he would see the boy again. Izuku felt numb, his head fuzzy and his body as though it wasn't there, and of course it wasn't. He opened his eyes to see a vast darkness with a single man with white hair sitting in a throne, a comically tall throne of obsidian. He sat with a smirk on his face, starting as the apparition of the boy whose body was covered in black and green smoke. No, it was the smoke. Izuku tried to call out to his friend, but no words came out. Well, color me surprised. I hadn't expected you to get here in only a few days. Truly, I picked correctly. The man clapped while chuckling to himself. Do not panic, young Midoriya. You are in a place in which minds meet. You may remember that I can take quirks, but those quirks also tend to hold vestiges of those that held them. I am one such thing. The man slowly stood and walked to the boy, placing a hand on his head while ruffling his hair. Now that you have made the connection, you may slowly form here. By then I may begin to merge into you. Can you turn around? The man walks behind Izuku. Izuku then struggles to silently turn to the man, seeing a large mass of writhing lights and flesh above him. Izuku would have panicked, but somehow he was calm. This thing did not seem to bother him. It looked almost friendly. This is the quirk I have given you besides my own. It is a composite quirk, so made of multiple vestiges whose wills are unable to act on this plane. I believe you named it Hydra Flame, a name I believe to be accurate to a point. Now, do your best to visit again, young Midoriya. I wish to become one with you. The man smiled, and then the world went dark once more. Beep, beep, beep. Izuku slowly opened his eyes, seeing an unfamiliar room and a heaviness in his body. Last he remembered, the nurse was about to use his quirk on him. He began to grow anxious and turned his head to see his mom reading a magazine in a chair not far from him. Mom, Izuku called out her weakly. Inko immediately looked up with wide eyes and a smile. Where? Inko raced over and hugged him, keeping her boy close. Izu, I'm glad you're awake. Izuku could hear sniffling in his ear as his mom smothered him in love. And Mom can't breathe. Izuku managed to choke out, which caused his mom to pull back and wipe her eyes. Sorry, you've been asleep for a few days, so I was worried. Your dad even stopped work to come see you. Though that was only for 2 days. He's gonna be so upset he missed you by a few hours, haha. Inko began to chuckle to herself and pulled a chair closer to the bed to hold Izuku's hand. Mom, where are we? Izuku looked around, figuring it was a doctor's office. Jaku General, sweetie, when you were showing no signs of healing, we figured something was wrong and had you taken to the hospital. Then it was found that you had a rare genetic problem. Do you remember the quirk doctor we met? He was here visiting and noticed the issue. He had you moved to Jaku General so he could take your case personally. Dr. Tsubasa, remember? Izuku nodded hesitantly, sort of remembering the doctor who looked like Dr. Eggman from the ancient Sonic movie he made his mom watch with him. Well, he said you have something called rapid onset quirk antithesia, where your body doesn't quite match up with your quirk. It can happen in milder varieties like a fire user not inheriting a fire resistance causing burns, but with those whose quirks have a regenerative function it becomes something worse. But the doctor plans on using some gene therapy to help you adapt. You remember when you ate Katsuki's explosion, right? Apparently eating fire causes you to heal up faster, which started the reaction. Long story short, your quirk is a bit off, but it'll be corrected like tightening a screw or putting an All Might figure's arm back in the socket. Inko had begun to speak quickly in the middle of her explanation, but Izuku managed to catch the gist of the issue and began to wonder if it was because the quirk wasn't his to start with. Maybe the gene therapy would make it work better. So, my quirk is hurting me instead of healing me. Inko takes a deep breath and squeezes her son's hand. Kind of yes. But don't worry, we'll fix the issue and make you all better. Inko smiles gently at Izuku, comforting him and reassuring him in a way only a mother could. Inko then reaches down and presses a button on the side of the bed to summon a nurse. Not too long after, a nurse peeks their head in to check on the patient and their visitor. He's awake. I'll let Dr. Tsubasa know. How are you feeling? Izuku speaks hesitantly after glancing to his mom. And numb and fuzzy. The nurse nods and leaves the room to page the specialist. Before long, a slightly comical-looking doctor with a bushy mustache and round spectacles enters the room. He looks over Izuku's vitals before speaking. I wish I could say it's good to see you again, kid, but given the circumstances, I'd say it's a miracle you are awake. The doctor didn't mince words, a trait good for adults but terrible for treating children, as Izuku shrinks back and squeezes his mother's hand in slight fear. Inko pipes up, showing her son frightened. Perhaps you could have put that a bit better. The doctor clears his throat before continuing. Well, I'd say your son is lucky. He is in a much more stable condition than he would have been had you not received a healing quirk, and one that didn't use his own body's energy to heal. To be frank, Miss Midoriya, your son is lucky to be alive because he was in a hospital when his body began to break down. Thanks to that, we were able to give him some quirk suppressants and keep him under to let the healing run its course. Now that he has woken up, he should be stable enough to wean him off the suppressants and begin treatment. But we must be careful not to trigger another episode, so I'd like him to stay here a bit longer so we can get him stable enough that an episode will be slow enough to get him to a hospital in time. Inko bit her lip in displeasure. The doctor wasn't sugarcoating it, but she could understand why. If it's this serious of a condition, then Izuku's life was in danger, and the doctor wasn't going to risk downplaying the issue. How long do you think he will be hospitalized? Well, it's hard to say, but if we go with the most stable treatment plan, which would be the least dangerous but the slowest, he could be home in a month and a half with complications. The doctor pulls a stool up and sits parallel to Inko on the other side of Izuku. What complications could arise? Inko asks in a solemn tone. Well, so long as the genome isn't triggered or the CRISPRs aren't seen as infection, his immediate treatment shouldn't be disturbed. However, this is an emergency patch. To get rid of the issue, he'll need weekly injections for years, perhaps 10 at the most, basically until puberty, so we can guide his body into maturing in a correct way, thus preventing him from passing the defect on to any potential kids. I know that is a long way off, but there's no way to disassociate genetics from heredity. Inko nodded slowly to demonstrate her understanding as she processed what the doctor said, while Izuku looked down at his hand and opened and closed it. I don't like shots. The doctor snorted at this slightly, the remark relieving some of the tension and solemn air that had built up in the room. Inko also let out a sigh mixed with a weak chuckle. It's okay, Izuku. You want to grow up to be a hero, right? So you can't let a few needles stop you, right? She let out a big grin to mimic All Might while making a pose of a bodybuilder. The doctor sat looking a bit confused and perhaps disgusted by the woman's antics, but Izuku beamed and nodded hard. Heroes aren't afraid of needles. That's right, Izu. Now let's let the nice doctor finish. Dr. Tsubasa took out a packet of papers from his lab coat and presented them to Inko. These are long-term admission papers for the hospital. You'll need to sign them as you are his parent. I've already verified that your insurance will cover it as well. You do still use the same as before, yes? Inko affirms the question. All right. You can visit him anytime as he is a minor. However, after visiting hours, you'll need to call the nurse's station to be let in. Do you have any questions? Izuku is the one to ask. What about school? You won't be going back for the school year, Izu. But I'll have some school books brought so you can go back next school year and not fall behind. Inko gives a pat on the head to her son, ruffling his hair a bit. Miss Midoriya, I recommend you and Izuku move closer to Jaku. Anywhere in the Kyoto prefecture would be fine, but it would allow me to transfer him to Jaku much quicker in case of an episode. Would that be an issue for you and your family? Inko shakes her head no. We were already planning on moving schools next year, so if anything it settles where. Well, happy coincidences then. I'll let you both digest all of this. I'll be back to take some blood after you submit consent for treatment. With that, the old doctor walks out, hands behind his back and purpose in his stride. Inko of course signs the papers, and over the first week different samples of Izuku are taken to develop a treatment for him. The next week starts the first trials, then followed by observation and testing. Izuku kept his mind off the feeling of being a lab rat by watching TV and writing notes on heroes he sees on TV. Sometimes he'd be given a workbook to do to keep up with school, but he'd usually finish them within the day, though they were meant for an entire year's worth of schooling in a certain subject. The doctor had taken note of his intelligence, deciding to sneak a peek at one of the notebooks Izuku had filled in his spare time. His eyes went wide at the detail and theories, the tactical mind which shouldn't belong to a child, and the uses of quirks. The doctor had confirmed only the beginnings of Izuku's connection to his master's quirk, however, it would seem to already be having an effect on the child's mind. The doctor had been given instructions to stimulate the connection and create a long-term operation to ameliorate Izuku's body, using his research into genetically enhanced soldier made from corpses. Namu, as he called them. He could find the best way to slowly and stably make the boy into the perfect vessel for his master. The doctor had recently also heard of a boy who gained a quirk which could copy quirks for a limited time. Perhaps he could have someone fetch him a sample to play with. Chapter 4: A New Home. After rounds of gene therapy, Izuku's body had become stable enough that the doctor was comfortable letting him do outpatient treatments. Over the past month, Ko and Hisashi moved out of the apartment in Musutafu and into a new one in the Kyoto prefecture. They had also set up Izuku to start at an elementary school nearby. Hisashi had taken a promotion and even began working from home on a work laptop so he could see his son more often. Though frequent business trips would take him away again, but overall it was a better situation for a father. Izuku opened the door to his new room to find all his All Might figures put in their old places, the room looking almost identical to his old room save for the actual layout. He rushed in and with starry eyes and a beaming smile exclaimed, "It's perfect." Hisashi followed behind with a box in his arms and chuckled, "I guess I underestimated how much merchandise we bought you. It took an hour to put it all together." Izuku paused and his smile was replaced by an embarrassed smirk and a slight blush. "Thank you, Dad." Hisashi put the last box on his son's bed and then embraced him. "I'm just glad you're getting better. The thought of almost losing you is really scary. So do your best not to worry your old man when you grow up, okay?" Hisashi teased his son, still holding him tightly. "Okay, Dad, I'll try." Hisashi soon let go of his son and walked out of the room, calling back, "Dinner is in an hour, so be sure to unpack." Izuku, being the obedient child that he is, decided to get his unpacking done sooner rather than later. Opening the box, he found an All Might toy he and Katsuki had both gotten from a gacha machine a year ago. He picked it and without emotion threw the toy away. The cold voice in his head surfacing once more, he continued throwing away items that had once held emotional value to him through his friendship. Finally, he got to a notebook, one labeled Hero Notes for the Future Volume 1. Opening the first page, he saw a sketch of his once friend and began to cry, tears slowly flowing down his cheeks, barely missing the book as they fell. Izuku was about to tear the page out when he stopped himself. "Just because he isn't my friend anymore doesn't mean we weren't once." He let go of the page and began to wipe his tears. He finished his unpacking and soon heard his mom calling downstairs for him to come eat. That night, Izuku once again visited that strange dreamscape. Seeing the man once more, he tried to speak. "Mr. Shigaraki." The man turned, seeing the boy, and had a faint smile. "Welcome back, young Izuku. It seems you've made progress. You can now speak." Izuku looked down, most of his body still covered in black and green fog, but he could now at least talk. Seeing this, the vestige spoke once more. "You will one day be able to move here. Your connect will grow exponentially from here." The man gestures to the fog on Izuku. "Mr. Shigaraki, is it okay that I'm getting quirk treatments? The doctor says my quirk is hurting me." The man nods and gives a gentle smile. "Worry not, young Izuku. That doctor you are seeing is familiar with my abilities. It isn't a coincidence that you met him again. He told me about your quirklessness, and after speaking with you I knew you could be my successor." "Successor?" Izuku parroted, confused. "As you know, my power is give and take, but it is known as another name. All for one. This world, filled with quirks, is at my fingertips. But alas, I will not live forever. So I thought that this power shouldn't die with me but be passed on to another." The man continued his speech, his theatrics capturing Izuku's attention. "I wish to be remembered, but my name has been stricken from all your history books, my efforts deeming me evil by those who fear me. And so you, young Izuku, will be my legacy. You can become much more than a hero." "Why stop there? More than a hero, like a mega hero, a ultra hero." The young boy beamed with starry eyes, causing the man to sputter in horror of the name. No, haha no. Young Izuku, you can become a symbol. They call All Might the symbol of peace, yes. Then what kind of symbol will you become? Think on it. And while you do, learn, grow, and become strong. Your mind is your greatest asset, for when your body fails you, your mind shall remain. With that, Izuku woke up, a newfound line of thinking taking hold. He would become a symbol. School doesn't start again for another few months, which between his constant notes, workbooks, and hero fanboying, meant that Izuku didn't have much to do, so he asked his dad to teach him about his work, heeding his dream friend's words to learn. Though the words were vague, he thought that learning things was only a good thing. This surprised Hisashi. Thinking his son had little interest in other professions besides being a hero, he was overjoyed at the chance to bond with his son. Smoke starting to leak from his mouth as he began teaching his son about business. Hisashi Midoriya was a businessman. He worked for an international firm who sold support gear and was in charge of negotiations with clients, subcontractors, and suppliers. His bosses believed that negotiations were best done in person, so Hisashi had to constantly be out, but since his promotion he became a coordinator, which was a middleman between the bosses and the sales team. Using his experiences, he taught Izuku the most important parts of his job. Soon Izuku realized that even heroes had side jobs. Some famous example were Power Loader, who was a support technician, teachers at hero schools such as UA, and even celebrities such as Uobami. You know Izuku, even All Might has support gear. He has his own technician as well. He's famous in my work. His name is David Shield and he works at Island. Hisashi smugly smirked at his son. He does, but he doesn't use tools like some heroes. Izuku protested. Tusk. All Might's suit is support gear. No normal fabric could hold up to his power. Izuku's eyes went wide, not even thinking that a costume would count. Cool. Izuku began scribbling into a notebook he had been using. Hisashi then noticed it was a second one. Where? Izuku looked up in confusion. Did you say something? No, don't worry about it. Hisashi waves the boy off, letting him continue his frantic drawing and note-taking. Hisashi continued teaching his son about business and even gave him a textbook he had from one of his college classes. Meanwhile, Inko would look over them fondly, feeling blessed that her family was all together. A dream she couldn't have thought possible a year ago. Mom, Dad, I want to learn how to make stuff too. Can I? Inko and Hisashi looked at each other and gave resigned smiles. It seemed that Izuku was a glutton for knowledge and he wouldn't stop anytime soon. I think we can figure something out. How about we look into a summer camp for you? Hisashi suggested, looking to Inko to make sure the idea wasn't shot down. Of course, she gave a nod and a gentle smile. That's a wonderful idea. Maybe you'll meet a few kids who you'll see at school. Really? Yeah. Izuku jumped up and down in excitement. Inko and Hisashi would eventually settle on the Kyoto Little Engineers Summer School. Though a mouthful, it had the backing of Hisashi's own company, Superb Support System Industries, or SSS Industries. The three of them then went out to get some lunch, deciding that they should get a feel for their new neighborhood. They find a local restaurant with a diner styling, offering a special on milkshakes. The family sits inside at a booth, Inko and Izuku on one side and Hisashi on the other. Izuku patiently waits for his chicken nuggets and watches a street performer in a top hat and mask juggle down the street a bit. He then uses his quirk to make his hat disappear and reappear in the air. Mom, when do you think I can start practicing with my quirk? Izuku asked hesitantly. Well, I think that's a question to ask the doctor on our next visit. Though we'd need to find a safe place to let you practice. Inko responds nonchalantly, looking up from her phone. Oh, Hisashi, Suki says congrats on the promotion. The man smiles in response. Tell her thank you for me. Oh, and ask how Masaru is. I think I lost his number when I got my company phone. Oh right, Masaru had to change his number cause of a media issue. Something about constant calls about his work. Inko lets out a sigh, pulling up her best friend's husband's number and holding it out to Hisashi to copy. Izu, do you want to know how Katsuki is? Izuku doesn't turn back from his viewing, only shortly replying no. You sure? He's been doing a bit better since his IED meds started to kick in. Inko prodded lightly, trying to encourage her son. No, I don't care about him anymore. Izuku replied with a hint of coldness in his voice. Hisashi arched his eyebrows hearing this uncharacteristic response. I thought you two were best friends, kiddo. He is not my friend. Friends don't call friends useless or make up mean names for them like Deku. Izuku turns to his father, a look of contempt on his face which causes Hisashi to pull back as Inko looks at her son in shock, never seeing him actively dislike someone so vocally before. I'm glad he's doing better for auntie and uncle at least. Izuku looks down, a frown still on his face as he tries to comprehend his own complex feelings on the subject of Katsuki Bakugo. Inko looks a bit sad at Izuku's words, figuring something else happened between the two boys they didn't tell their mothers. While Hisashi reaches over the table to grab Izuku's chin and push it upwards to look at him. Izuku, you may not like Katsuki anymore, but Aunt Mitsuki is still your mom's best friend. So don't tell her about what you said, or at least not so bluntly. Did you know that Bakugo has a condition too? Like you do. Izuku looks to his mom and then shakes his head. No, I didn't. While yours is your body, his is his mind. Auntie Mitsuki has the same condition too, but she manages with medicine like you get your shots. Katsuki has to take medicine too now. While it doesn't excuse his actions, don't make Auntie Mitsuki feel bad for passing her condition to Katsuki. Okay. Izuku frowns a bit, trying to digest the words his father has said. He didn't have to like Katsuki anymore, but he did like Auntie. And if Auntie has the same as Katsuki, then maybe he and Katsuki could be friends again. but they don't live near each other anymore, so he can't even if he wanted to. It slowly dawns on Izuku that he threw away all of the things that reminded him of Katsuki, and he begins to tear up. Hiccups and slight panic set in, making Izuku act his age. But we am moved. I I'll never see him again. Izuku looks between his mom and dad, guilt for his anger, his actions, and sadness for losing his best friend now coming to the surface in a wave of tears that could be mistaken for a tear quirk. Oh Izu, don't worry. You'll see him again. We can invite him to your birthday party. Plus it's not as though you can't talk to him over the phone. Inko puts her arm around his shoulder to lean him on her in comfort. She's right. And if you both still become heroes, then we'll have to move back if you want to go to UA. Hisashi sputtered out, not used to seeing his son like this, the lost time now making it clear how much he needs to catch up to his wife. Izuku sniffles a bit more before a waiter slides by, placing their food and shakes on the table before sliding away. Izuku slowly calmed down while his mom babied him a bit, getting him to eat his nuggets and sipping his shake. He turns to the window again, seeing a hero trying to get at the magician, but the magician manages to evade him and run off. He frowns a bit, confused as to why a hero would do that, but doesn't ask his mom as he feels a bit embarrassed by her now constantly babying him. The magician is gone. Magician. Hisashi looks outside trying to spot what Izuku was looking at, but only sees a small crowd dispersing. Yeah, a hero chased him away. Izuku says, his mood only getting more somber. Well, perhaps he was using his quirk. If he didn't have a permit, then hero would be breaking the law. Hisashi nodded to himself, satisfied with his explanation. Using quirks is against the law. Izuku scrunches up his face in disapproval. To a boy who was quirkless, not being allowed to use his quirk wasn't a popular idea. Well, yes and no. If you have permission from the owner of a place, then it's fine. Public quirk use without a permit is an issue. Do you know the difference between villains and criminals? Hisashi puts on his teacher tone again. He enjoys teaching his son things, even fantasizing about homeschooling him. It's quirks, Izuku guessed, based on the flow of the conversation. Ding, ding, ding. Correct. Hisashi made an O shape with his arms over his head, making Inko chuckle a bit. Wait, so villains are only villains cause of quirks? Does that mean there are no quirkless villains? Izuku pointed to his father with a fry casually. I don't think so, no. Unsure if the Hero Association categorized them as one, they'd be viewed that way. But legally I don't think so. Hisashi smirked and leaned forward, spitting a flame at his son's fry, toasting it lightly. This got a giggle from Izuku, who promptly ate it. Izuku continued eating his nuggets as his father spoke, now slowly getting into a better mood. The trio enjoyed some family time while a street magician casually made an escape from a D-list hero. Chapter 5. Green and Pink, Inventor Extraordinaires. Izuku's gluttony for knowledge had not slowed. In fact, Hisashi had begun to take his son to the library to let Izuku read as much as he liked. One day Hisashi fell asleep only to be woken up by a librarian near dark, finding his son had made a wall of books he had read. Inko was not pleased with him for that, nor that Izuku had learned how to take apart the microwave, which he did only to put back together with the number pad upside down. Hisashi couldn't help but break out in laughter seeing this, while Inko yelled at him for laughing. Needless to say, Izuku was not allowed to touch the toolbox again. The Midoriya household became a no-tinkering zone until 1 week later, when Izuku met a small pink-haired girl sitting in his usual space at the library. She had eyes like crosshairs and small braided dreads on the top of her head. In her hands was a book Izuku wanted to read about combustion. Can I read that? Izuku approached the girl and asked carefully. The girl did not seem to hear him, however, which prompted Izuku to instead sit next to her and read. Only after a minute or two did the girl acknowledge him. Who are you? You like these books too? The girl's pupils dilated slightly, looking at Izuku. I really like reading about different things. I was hoping to read this one next, but I didn't want to bother you. Izuku gave a smile to the girl, who smiled back. Thoughtful. The book is big enough for us both to read, so here, let's share. The pink-haired girl moved the book over so it was between them. This allowed both kids to read the book on combustion, a topic 2 kids shouldn't be researching, but if you didn't look too hard, it was cute. Sadly, all cute things come to an end. As they finished the book, the pink-haired girl looked to Izuku. Well, it was nice to meet you, Green. Hope to see you again. Izuku smiled, his bookmate's nickname making him smile. Sure, though I won't be back here for a while. I hope we can play together sometime, Pink. The girl's eyes widened as a smile crept across her face. She nodded in response. With that, she took the book and ran off towards a woman with long light blue hair and pigtails, leaving Izuku alone with a tinge of sadness. Though they had only read together, he thought the girl was nice and wanted to play with her. Miku Hatsum had merely taken her daughter to the library as a reward for her finishing her chores and finishing her school work in time to do so. She was worried her daughter wasn't making many friends, and she showed no interest in girly things like dolls, instead asking for Legos and models. While she could understand kids wanting toys, she was not pleased when her daughter began asking for things that were in the realm of tools, which no child would usually ask for. At least she hadn't when she whacks a kid. But a faint light of hope appeared when she saw her daughter and a boy her age sharing a book. It was the cutest thing right out of a kid's movie or commercial. Her daughter ran up to her and grabbed her hand as they began to leave. "So May, did you make a friend?" Miku swung her arm with her daughter as they walked. He was nice. He didn't interrupt my reading just cause he wanted the same book." May looked up and smiled at her mother. "Oh, that is nice. I saw you shared. I'm proud of you. Remember, sharing is caring." Miku praised her daughter. "So what was his name, sweetie?" May stopped and frowned a bit before answering. "Green." Miku's face froze at that. Her daughter hadn't learned the boy's name or promptly forgot it. Knowing her daughter, it could be either. "May, do you remember what to do when you meet someone?" May nodded confidently and put a fist to her chest. "Determine how much money they have." Miku face-palmed, unable to do anything but groan, knowing exactly who taught her that. "No dear, Grandma isn't right. You should introduce yourself so they do the same back." May cocked her head to the side in utter confusion. "But Grandma says that it's important to know that so you know who is worth your time." "Ugh, that woman. I swear I'm gonna." She stopped herself from continuing, noticing May's gaze. Anyway, if you see him again, be sure to ask his name after you give yours." "Okay." May nods and continues walking with her mom. Hisashi was lost for words. One moment Izuku had been smiling about meeting someone at the library, then the next he was panicking. Apparently his son was having such a fun time he neither gave his name nor got the other kid's name. And now his son was mopping in the car, muttering under his breath whatever clues he could find about her identity. Which would be impressive if Hisashi wasn't sure that Izuku would learn to hack just to get into the police database to find a fellow bookworm. "Say, Izuku, you said you two were reading the same book, right?" "What book?" This caused Izuku to snap his head up and stare at his dad. "Combustion Fundamentals by Shasuke Lupo." Hisashi lets out a silent groan inside his mind and promises to himself to ensure his son doesn't read any more potentially dangerous material. "So wouldn't that mean you two have the same interests?" Izuku nodded, following along with his dad's logic. "Now this may be a stretch, but don't you think if she lives around here, has similar interests, she might also go to the engineering summer camp?" Izuku's mood instantly flipped, his somberness becoming a fantastic hope of seeing the pinkette again, which of course caused him to remember all the other people he could meet. "You're right. Thanks, Dad." Izuku beamed at his father. Hisashi lets out a sigh, glad he got his son in a better mood before Inko could see him. He still hadn't gotten out of the doghouse for falling asleep while at the library last week. After getting home, Izuku began his usual note-taking and such, the amount of books filled now filling a bookshelf. Hisashi saw this and had a pang of worry. At this rate he'll run out of room by next year. Perhaps a phone would nip the issue in the bud early. It was soon time for the first day of the summer camp, though it was actually a summer school program. Inko had been in charge of accompanying Izuku for the first day of the course. Due to being his guardian, there was an orientation of sorts to understand what her child would be doing each day. The course was 5 days a week from 9 to 3, which involved labs and lectures on engineering. These were of course meant for kids on the younger side, the oldest kids being 10-year-olds. Izuku and Inko walked into the classroom set up at a local community college to see a number of parent-child duos sitting at 2-person desks facing the whiteboard. They were not the lady ones to enter the room, so that meant they'd need to find a seat before they blocked the entrance. Izuku, however, saw the back of someone's head and could barely hold back from dragging his mom down the path between desks to the front of the classroom. "Izu, hold on," Inko pleaded as her son pulled her hand towards a pair of pink and grayish-blue heads, one done up in a bun behind with the other in small braids. As Izuku got closer, the pink one perked up from her focus on something and turned to see a boy smiling toward her direction. "Green, pink," they both said as they made eye contact. The older lady with the bun glanced up from a word search as her granddaughter called out, "Bae, you know him?" The old lady questioned, getting a nod in return. The girl had been fiddling with some Legos, some small electric pieces weaving into them as well. "Pink, I forgot something the last time." Izuku gave a slightly embarrassed smirk as he stated, "My name is Izuku Midori. It's nice to meet you." Inko looked at her son fondly as she watched him make a friend. She had heard the story before and her husband guessed the girl would be here too. The pink girl responded in kind, "I'm Mei Hatsu, future inventor. Nice to meet you, Green." The old lady next to her gave a snort at the response, then looked to Inko. "I'm Beitoria Polyak. This little gremlin is my granddaughter." The old woman was the picture of a mischievous grandma. Her eyes were sharp and almost bird-like yellow with an almost beaked nose. Inko couldn't help but giggle, giving a bow as she pulled out the chair on the desk behind the grandmother and daughter. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Inko Midoriya. My son met your daughter at the library the other day but had completely forgotten introductions. Sounds like we both have some lovable goofballs to look after." The two guardians began casual conversation as two problem children began theirs. The pink-haired Mei fiddled with the Lego contraption in front of her as Izuku leaned against her table to watch. "So, what are you making?" Izuku questioned, trying to gauge the parts Mei was working on. Baby number 3. The combustinator, May enthusiastically said as she squished some Legos together. Isn't that dangerous? Izuku cocked his head. Only if I fail. And failure is the mother of invention, May boasted. A click could be heard in May's hand, after which a flicker of panic went over the girl's face as she quickly took apart the toy. Izuku noticed her swift movements and grew curious. What's wrong? Did you mess up? May tried to deflect. No, I merely loosened something. Then tighten it. I am trying. May began to sweat a bit. This was causing her voice to waver, which led to the guardians glancing over. May, I thought you just brought Legos like you said. Why is it starting to swell? The old hockeyed lady said. I might have fibbed. Sorry, Granny. May gave a head knock and stuck out her tongue. Inko's eyes widened. That's not gonna blow up, is it? May slowly nodded. Mom, can I eat it? I could eat Katsuki's quirk. Izuku put a finger to his lip, however his mother's response was cut off by a boisterous laugh at the front of room. A man with rounded claws for hands and a monocle began to draw on the whiteboard to start the class as the small group panicked and glanced between the time bomb and the man. Izu, you might miss camp if you do. You know what happens, right? Inko asked seriously. I think I'll be fine. I'm not hurt, so it won't be bad. Izuku smiled, however the comment caused worried looks to deepen on the other two. All right, just be sure not to interrupt class. Inko sighed, knowing that the consequences would likely be dire if it did blow up. Miss Inko, what before May could ask, Izuku took the device and shoved it in his mouth. His cheeks puffed up in a flash with a muffled sound like a burp. He then spat out the device and complained. Tastes like mustard. Izuku opened and closed his mouth in disgust. Neat. I guess I know your quirk now. May smiled and then poked at the small broken device before having it snatched by the old lady next to her. Hey, nope, shush and listen to the teacher. Izuku found his way to his seat next to Inko, now paying attention to the gentleman who had written welcome to class on the board. Welcome, young ones, to the Kyoto Summer of Engineering course. I am your instructor, Carrick Montague. I am a retired support engineer and am of course in charge of your rascals for the coming month. Parents, you are welcome to attend any day to sit next to your child as well as leave them. We offer daycare services if you require it and have filled out the paperwork. The man's hands shifted from claws to metallic digits. He then put up a finger. I have but one ask. Do not interrupt me or other engineers. Other than that, we shall get along fine. The man stroked his curling mustache with his hand before changing it back to a claw. Izuku became curious of the man's quirk. He could not help it, he had to know. So, he raised his hand, which the teacher motioned to him to speak. Are your claws your quirk, Mr. Montague? The older man gave Izuku a gentle smile. No, my quirk is a mental one. I crafted these hands myself after I lost mine in an accident. A word of caution, boy. Do not forget safety procedures. Izuku nods hesitantly but continues to listen to the old man's orientation. Now for starters, I shall have you young ones build me something out of these materials. With the snap of his finger, the door he came through opens and an assistant wheels a number of sticks, glue bottles, and different pasta on a tray to the center of the room before bowing and stepping back. Toria here will help pass out your materials. This is a test of creativity and wit. All I need from you folks is to have some creation by the end of it. I do not expect this to be a working thing, but a model of course, so just come up with an item and make the shape. You'll have until lunchtime to finish, and after we'll begin the pitches. Yes, you will also have to explain your idea. I do not mind if you use your quirks to aid you. However, I will ask they be used at a minimum. Teaming up is also within the rules of this bout. Parents, however, can only help in physical labor and pitches. I will ask that only those with children below the age of 7 be allowed to have their parents help pitch, as engineers need to be able to explain and communicate their ideas to others. Now, if you have any questions, please come up and ask me. If it's relevant to the whole class, I will explain it. Izuku and May looked at each other, trying to silently decide if they should work together or not. Inko, however, interrupts. Izu, sweetie, how are you feeling? No tingling or numbness? Nope, I'm fine. Dr. Tsubasa said I could start using my quirk now, remember? Inko nodded, letting out a sigh, but he also said not to push it. If you feel off, then let me know. Okay. Victoria arched an eyebrow, while listening to the two, which Inko didn't fail to notice, of course. Izu has had issues with his quirk since he got it. Last time he had to go to the hospital since his body wasn't quite right for his quirk. The old lady nods, deciding it prudent not to ask too much about it, seeing how worried the mother was. May, however, didn't have her grandmother's knack for social cues and bluntly asked, "What's wrong with your quirk, Green?" cocking her head to the side slightly as she asked. When I eat fire, it heals me, but my healing doesn't work right, so I have to get some shots every week to fix it. I think it was called rapid onset quirk anesthesia. Izuku looks to his mom for confirmation, who nods and takes over. Last time Izuku ate an explosion, he was injured, and his healing instead started to do the opposite, but it looks like he's getting better. Mom, does this mean I can use my quirk to help us make something? Izuku bounces up and down in his seat, excited at finally being able to use his quirk. Only a little bit, okay. Izuku squeals in excitement, hopping out of his seat to go get materials. He quickly returns with a tray filled with sticks, pasta, and glue, which he sits in front of Mei. Miss Polyak, can I sit next to Mei? The gentle old lady smirks and ruffles the kid's hair before moving to his old seat. Green, what baby do you want to make? We could use some hair ties for their elasticity and make something that flies. Oh, I don't want to make a model, by the way. I want a fully functional baby. Izuku nods, listening to Mei's ranting, which then causes him to mumble ideas under his breath in turn. We could probably use the Legos and parts you brought, as well as a napkin for a hot air balloon. Perhaps we could rig a small generator burning the sticks for the heat and hot air rising. Though that assumes my quirk's fire is normal and not quirk material. It is green, so Mei, it's quirk material. I haven't done any checking. Soon the two began talking at the same time, their guardians unable to make out much while the two were able to understand each other perfectly. The two gremlins in the making decided on a launcher to start with a balloon to float. Victoria leaned over to Inko, watching the kids put stuff together slowly, only stopping when disagreeing on trivial details, which were hashed out quite quickly as the limits on materials didn't allow much in the way of deviation. Hey Inko, you catch any of that? Not at all, the green-haired lady giggled, covering her mouth with her hand. Seems we've united to very passionate future inventors. Inko remarks. The day went on, Izuku and Mei pleading with the latter's grandmother to give back the exploded device. Begrudgingly, the old lady gives it back, after being swayed by Izuku's fierce negotiations, so the two may use the parts to make a slingshot using her hair ties. The two somehow manage to make the best slingshot possible with the materials used. Izuku hesitates a moment before nodding to himself and blowing a small green fire, the stick catching immediately and burning far more quickly than it was supposed to. A light green smoke tickles Izuku's nose as he inhales it and begins to feel better than he has since he had started his gene therapy. The child licks his lips, a taste similar to that of smoked meat permeating his mouth. He began to do the same again, of course, this time trying to slow the speedy burn, which he manages to do. This time he creates a normal flame, which causes Izuku to cock his head to the side in confusion. Production quirks don't usually produce two types of things. Doubt about his quirk began to take hold. It was shattered, however, by the sudden pull from his hands as Mei snatched the flame from his hands. The Pinkette took it and placed it in the air balloon the two had made, and it began to rise slowly into the air. It works. Yes, Izuku and Mei yelled at the same time. Soon they repeated this to ensure that their baby worked over and over again. However, they were cut off by the instructor calling out that it was lunch time. It is time for lunch. Leave your work on your desks and head to either the cafeteria or with your guardians for lunch. We'll meet back here in 45 minutes. The monocled gentleman then walked out of the room with great speed. The quartet decided amongst themselves that instead of the cafeteria they'd head to a local diner for some cheap and simple food. The two children started talking about different things they learned, Izuku explaining about quirks while Mei explained about how different mechanics work. The two kids had gone from mostly strangers to almost inseparable in record speed, reckoned the eldest in the car. Inko had been worried that her son may not be able to make friends with some of the kids his age due to what Bakugo and the others did to him, but she was glad that she was wrong. He managed to make a friend with similar interests and hobbies easily, which put her worries to the side. Now she just needed to figure out how to mend his and Katsuki's friendship. Chapter 6, a first, but not a last, not by a long shot. Izuku and Mei had become a team of troublemakers to their respective families. Mei would often come over after summer school, except on Mondays as Izuku had to go get his shots. This pattern repeated for the majority of summer break until the next year of elementary school began. Izuku had convinced his parents to let him go to Mei's school, which was a private school. One day at recess, Izuku had been cornered by a group of boys whom seemed annoyed at him for some reason. One boy with flame red hair with compound eyes, another with no hair but golden eyes, and a third with rainbow hair surrounded Izuku while he sat on his bench typing notes on his new phone. Hey nerd. The boy swatted Izuku's phone from his hand, causing it to land in the dirt. Izuku frowned, seeing his phone on the ground, looking up at the assailant with a glare. Don't look at me like that. Your girlfriend caused us not to go on our field trip. Izuku rolled his eyes, then tried to pick up his phone, but the boy with no hair stepped on his foot. Pay attention when someone I'd talking. Izuku winced, his finger pressed against the glass on his phone as it cracked and he began to bleed. Get off, Izuku yelled, the pain starting to get worse and worse. The boy of course didn't listen. You better apologize. We were looking forward to going to the zoo and you freaks ruined it with your stupid toys. You're hurting me. Izuku began to tear up. The boy, crushing his finger, has begun to turn in foot and press harder. Apologize for being a freak or else. The boy with rainbow hair held up his finger, which let out a rainbow-colored liquid. Settling on red, the boy's hair and the liquid began to burn. Izuku desperately pulled back but couldn't get away from the boy's finger. Izuku bit his lip. He knew their type. Katsuki and his minions didn't stop either even after getting what they want. The pain was keeping Izuku strangely calm. He could feel his finger throbbing under heel, but his mind was icy and clear. Izuku started going over his options. He could try his quirk, but he wasn't sure it would work with liquids. He could try to hurt them, but that would lead to him getting in trouble too. With him already hurt, perhaps taking the hit would be okay. But depending on the damage, it could trigger an episode of anesthesia. Izuku hadn't used it yet, but Mr. Shigaraki had given him his quirk too. He had said it was a quirk taking and giving quirk, meaning it could disable enemies right. Like a permanent erasure quirk. Izuku had found his solution, but he didn't know the specifics of the quirk, so he would have to guess, quickly going through his quirk knowledge to eliminate the conditions of the unused quirk. First, range, assuming touch should be safe. Second is activation. If I focus on Mr. Shigaraki instead of Hydra Flame, perhaps it'll work. Or is it more like sucking in fire? Izuku grabbed at the leg, pinning his hand, and tried to activate the quirk, feeling something amorphous in the boy. Izuku bit his lip, and then tried inhaling like when he ate flames. The amorphous thing left the leg and went into Izuku, which went unnoticed. However, the foot on Izuku's hand and foam leaned down harder. I guess he doesn't want to sat. He's sorry, Morio. Show him why he should've. The hairless boy taunted to the rainbow-haired brat. Izuku felt a burning sensation and grunted in pain, refusing to scream to give them the satisfaction. Instead, he focused. The amorphous thing was in him, but now he needed to know how to give it back. So instead of inhaling, he exhaled, pushing the thing back into the leg, which again went unnoticed. This told Izuku that he could steal the rainbow quirk without the boy learning it was him. Mr. Shigaraki had said people were scared of his power. If Izuku was found to have it and have another quirk, people would accuse him. Izuku figured he'd need a distraction, something to get the focus off him. So Izuku did something drastic. He balled up his fist and jolted towards the rainbow boy's hand, biting it hard. The boys all screamed, not expecting this. A happy side effect was the freeing of Izuku's hand, but an unusual consequence was a thought that crossed Izuku's mind. It tastes good. The taste of iron was light, but Izuku was tasting the boy's blood. His slightly sharpened canines has pierced the skin. Izuku was stunned for a moment before a dull throb of his finger snapped him out of it. Izuku decided to run. He knew a teacher would be somewhere. He just had to get to the building. As Izuku ran past the boy, he pushed his arm out of the way, at the same time giving his power back. A rainbow amorphous thing almost slotted back into place in the rainbow-haired boy, leaving him to never know that his quirk was ever gone. Izuku's rush of adrenaline was strong. The pain, the taste, the thrill of a plan working, all hiding a fact of Izuku's biology. Izuku managed only 20 steps before blacking out. Mei had been smiling, about to see her best friend Izuku for recess to talk about what they'd build next. She had been stopped by the teacher, who wanted to impress upon her that no inventing would occur at recess. Mei had begrudgingly agreed, as last time she had done so, one of her babies had hit the bus for the field trip and caused it to get a flat tire, canceling the trip. Mei was looking forward to going to see animals so she could get ideas for more inventions. Mei's happy-go-lucky attitude went away as soon as she saw Izuku on the ground and a few boys kicking him. A small group of students had noticed, and a teacher was running over to stop them, but Mei was already halfway there. "You send that pink-haired freak. It's your fault. You're both weirdos." The kid kicked the unmoving Izuku once more, which caused Mei to start crying, still running. The teacher was only now able to grab the boy just as Mei ran up and crouched down to Izuku, shaking him. Green, wake up," she pleaded with the boy. Another teacher had come and had to drag Mei away from Izuku, crying and screaming all the while. Mei cried for almost an hour in the guidance counselor's office before her mother got there to pick her up. Her mother hugged her tight and pat her back as muffled sobs came out of her daughter's mouth. Hisashi was typically a mild-mannered guy. It took a lot to piss him off. Even getting punched by a drunkard would do little to anger him, though some emotions would escape in the form of smoke. That would usually be the case except for the family button. If you push said button, you will, quote, unleash the dragon, as Mitsuki Bakugo had once put it. And today the dragon was unleashed. Not only had his son been attacked, the teacher had tried to shirk responsibility by saying that it was just a scuffle and that boys will be boys. My son's finger was broken, glass wad embedded in his hand from his crushed phone. His face suffered burns from a boy's quirk. Not to mention that boy then went on to kick him while he wad passed out. "You had better have a lawyer, because I will be having mine throw the book at you." Flames came out of the man's nose as he breathed, a clear rage in his eye as he stared down the teacher, whom had taken a smoke break instead of watching his child. The principal was wincing at the idea of the backlash of what was to come, already calculating on how to cut off the teacher. "Your son has a regenerative quirk. It's hardly worth getting lawyers involved." "No." The man wore a dismissive expression, waving off Hisashi's threat. This, of course, flabbergasted the principal. Even if the boy had a regenerative quirk, it wasn't as though he could not feel pain. It also seemed that the teacher hadn't read the young man's file, else he would have known that his regenerative part was an antithesis to his body, which was a detriment, not a boon. Ah yes, I'm glad you brought that up. Isashi smiled, a vein bulging on his head as he spoke. As we informed the school, Izuku has a form of quirk antithesia which is rooted in his regeneration. As such, when he was attacked yesterday, it triggered an episode which has caused him to be hospitalized for another week. We informed you that if he was injured he would need to be sent to the hospital immediately, however you left him in the nurse's office instead. So we will be suing for medical malpractice as well. The principal wanted to protest, however he was silenced by the fury that was Hisashi Midoriya. Hisashi then left the office. Walking through the halls of the school, he stomped out. He already contacted his legal team, which reminded him he should teach Izuku about laws sometime. Perhaps one of his lawyers could talk to him about it. And Ko had numerous worries. Any parent did, though she was currently finding that a few of those worries were being made reality. Her son had another episode after being attacked once again. He was unconscious in a hospital room again, and she was unable to do anything for her son. She was only able to watch him. She felt like she was failing him as a mother. Miss Midoriya, an old man called out, wearing round spectacles and a lab coat. The doctor who was in charge of Izuku's treatment had entered the room without Inko noticing due to her thoughts. Ah yes, Dr. Tsubasa. Inko sits up straight, trying to hide her sour mood. I was hoping to get your consent on something. The doctor handed her a clipboard with a small stack of papers. It will also require some of your blood. To give a rough explanation, I am hoping to reintroduce your genes into Izuku's. I feel it may be able to aid in the stabilization process. Inko perked up at the prospect of being able to do something for her son. She quickly looked over the papers. Seeing no glaring issues, she signed on the dotted line. If you think it'll help my Izu, I don't mind shedding some blood. The doctor gave a kind smile, taking the clipboard back. I assume you haven't eaten today, since you haven't moved from that spot, but if you are to give blood, you need to have something. Please go to the cafeteria, Miss Midoriya. I will let you know if your son awakens while you are gone. Inko looked to her son, letting out a reluctant sigh. You're right, and Izuku would be sad if he saw me starving myself because of him. Thank you, doctor. With that, she bowed and collected her purse to leave the room. After the woman left, the old man locked the door. Taking out a needle, he inserted it into the IV. Izuku had to keep his fluids up. The doctor sat down on a stool, looking over the packet and other files he needed to go over for other projects while he waited. A familiar sound awoke Izuku, the soft beeping of a heart monitor telling him he was alive and in a hospital. Izuku fluttered open his eyes only to sense something to his right. He glanced to see an old man, a familiar old man, but his body let off a sound. This sound was pulsating, artificial. It beckoned Izuku to reach out to the doctor. I wouldn't do that, young lad, else I'll become a crippled old coot. Izuku pulled his hand back. Snapping out of his haze, he looked at the doctor once more in alarm. Does he know? The old man gave a smirk. The look on your face tells me you're wary. Good. Master's successor should be wary. Master, you mean Mr. Shigaraki, don't you? Izuku quickly caught up, mind getting back into the swing of things. Indeed, I am one of his confidantes. He has made me your doctor as well. Since we cannot risk his power getting out, of course. You, young Izuku, have just used his power for the first time, causing your body to shift once more, which caused you to black out. You've been here since yesterday. Izuku listened silently. This meant Mr. Shigaraki was watching over him, not just leaving him on his own. He could tell the vestige of Mr. Shigaraki had more to say than just what was being told to him. I am curious. The master sees quirks like an aura around others. Do you see the same? Izuku shakes his head. I hear something, like a beat. Almost musical on repeat. Yours sounds like synthetic music. The doctor blinks in surprise, eyes wide. Synthetic. Would you be surprised to know my quirk is a copy of my original? Izuku closes his eyes, listening to the sound of the doctor's quirk. He notices a second distinct sound coming from his coat pocket as well. A piano. At least that's the closest thing he can compare it to. You have something in your jacket. Izuku stares around where he heard the sound. The doctor now dropping his jaw, sputtering to collect himself, the boy having exceeded his expectation. You are quite correct. I have a gift from the master for you. It will allow you to take and give quirks a bit more cleverly. It is a copy of one of the master's favorite quirks, Rivet Stab. It allows for tendrils to be generated from different parts of the body. If done correctly, you'll be able to stealthily give a quirk back, as they don't need to harm the target. Izuku digested the words the doctor spoke. A word which stuck out to him was copy. Copy quirks. The doctor has access to this, meaning so does Mr. Shigaraki. The man definitely didn't need to give him his own. He could have just given a copy, but a copy might not have a vestige. Why? Izuku's mind was racing. He felt indebted to Mr. Shigaraki, but he could tell after speaking to the vestige. He wasn't a hero, nor did he have a good impression of them, which meant he was a villain. Was Izuku supposed to be a villain too? The doctor took out a vial with a squirming mass inside it. Something alive was in this vial. Izuku could hear the piano now. It was sheer and metallic, unlike a normal piano. Izuku reached out his hand and took the creature's casing. Good lad, now open it and take the quirk. Izuku followed the doctor's instructions and felt an amorphous thing enter his body. It felt sharp to Izuku, who soon felt it click into place in his body. It feels different. Izuku flexed his hands, causing black tendrils with red lines to extend from their tips. It is likely due to being a transformation-type quirk. The doctor was starting to smile broadly, his breathing slightly labored. If you ever need something, young Izuku, call this number. This will connect you to the master's assistant, Kurogiri. Izuku mustered up some courage to ask. I want to learn about quirks, to train mine too. If I'm a successor, I should know things right. The doctor wasn't shocked by the request, but it hadn't been expected either. From what he'd seen of the boy, he was a glutton for knowledge. Their observations noted he visited the library often, but the doctor was unsure how to answer, not sure if the boy was of the right mindset yet. I will have to ask the master on this. I am unsure how that would work with the current situation. The doctor had decided to respond in uncertainty and an offensive answer. Izuku nodded, his eyes penetrating into the doctor. This boy is too observant, too smart, but he is still a child. So long as the possession goes well, it won't be a problem. The doctor, a coward by nature, found himself wary of a child of 5 years of age. Now, I will be putting you back to sleep. You'll awaken in about an hour, so your mother may be the first to see you awaken. The doctor pocketed the vial once more and took out another needle, injecting it into the IV. Sleep well, young Izuku. I shall inform you of his decision next visit. With that, the doctor waited for Izuku to sleep once more and exited the room, chuckling to himself in glee. It's working. The improvements to All for One have taken hold well. The lack of palm holes means he only needs contact, while the sensing of quirks is no longer blocked by only what is seen. If my theory is correct, he may be able to take quirks by mixing the mothers into it now that it isn't bound by factor. Not to mention, it seems mutant factors are no longer surfacing beyond the Hydra Flame composite. It seems he is able to selectively activate which to work with while keeping the other in a dormant state. The master will be pleased, very, very pleased. The doctor went on to continue his work in an unexpectedly good mood. Quirk, Rivet Stab. This quirk is a copy of the original transformation type. It allows the user to create black tendrils laced with red circuit lines along them from different body parts, hands, spine, and calves. These tendrils can be pointed to stab or meld into a target, as it is also a part of the body. Touch quirks without factors can be used from them as well. Quirk factor, a part of the user body which the quirk manifests, or can only be used from. An example would be Katsuki Bakugo's palms, as only they can create sparks for his explosions, or Izuku's reptilian eyes, which are a mutant factor. Chapter 7. Festering Hatred. Izuku had been in the hospital for a week, waiting for his body to acclimate and stabilize. He had decided to test his new quirk while his mother was gone for the evenings. Finding out that he could connect his tendrils to objects and pull them towards him by deactivating the transformation. He also managed to entertain himself when he found out he could make shapes out of the long tendrils. After he was discharged, his father reminded him to make a thank you card for the Hatsums who had sent a get well card. Izuku was excited to see his best friend again. The week was very boring without her. His dad had brought him a book of laws to keep him entertained, but of course he had gotten through it in about a day and a half. The thought cut through his happy mood like a hot knife through butter. Izuku frowned, a small plum of smoke exiting his mouth when he let out an exhale. He shook his head in an effort to rid himself of that thought, trying to look forward to seeing Mei instead. Izuku entered the classroom and looked for his seat. His senses were attacked by the onslaught of sounds from the children's quirks. It felt like being forced to listen to a song he liked on top of another. He saw Mei sitting at her own desk and waved, only to be met with a slight frown and a look away. He tried to listen for her quirk but couldn't separate the sound. Not that he'd heard it before. Izuku was confused as to why his friend was avoiding his gaze. He had been looking forward to seeing her again. Instead, he saw one of the boys who attacked him snicker behind her. A feeling in Izuku's chest made him ache. All he could do was wait, even though he wanted to talk to Mei immediately, even though something made his chest ache and burn. The day went by and finally it was recess. He turned to look at Mei, who looked away again only to run off. Izuku gave chase, however. As Mei ran, Izuku ran faster. It didn't take long for him to catch her by the hand. Pink, why are you trying to avoid me? Did I do something wrong? Aren't we friends? Izuku stared at Mei, his eyes showing a loneliness. Still Mei looked away, only responding with a sob. We shouldn't be friends anymore. This caused Izuku to let go of her hand. The pain in his chest growing fiercer, smoke began to escape his mouth as his breathing became labor. Why? Izuku muttered quietly, then yelled why. Izuku exhaled a bout of flame. The green enveloped his vision a moment as he pulled Mei's shoulder. This forced her to turn around. The sight of his friend crying made Izuku's chest hurt in a different way. The burning pain became sharp. His frustration faded, replaced by concern. Through her sobs, Mei uttered a sentence that caused Izuku's emotions to shift once more. Because you got hurt because of me. They attacked me because of the bus. The realization of his friend's logic giving at least some clarity to the situation. Mei, you weren't the one who attacked me. They did. They chose to. Mei shakes her head, her tears splashing away from her cheeks as she does so. If I hadn't messed up, if I hadn't built something, then you wouldn't have gotten hurt. And what if I want to be your friend anyway? Izuku's question had Mei take a step back. What? Why would Mei was cut off by Izuku pulling her into a hug. The boy began to mimic his mother, patting and rubbing Mei on the back to get them to calm down or let it all out. I'm sorry, Izuku said softly. Mei slumped against him, crying even more. It's my hick, he said. It was my fault. Mei sobbed out. Izuku let her cry, collecting his thoughts as she let it out. He kept sniff saying they'd hurt you again. Izuku pushed Mei away gently, leading her by the hand to a bench. Would you like to be friends with me, Mei? Izuku let out a smile and put out a hand to his only friend. Mei rubbed her eyes, nodding with a frown on her face. Good, cause I want to be your friend. Izuku's smile turns wry, his outstretched hand waving slightly, waiting for Mei to take it. It's at this moment that a sound reaches Izuku's ears. A soft, grainy sound, like that of a record player playing an upbeat tune. It was almost like the sound of a cartoonish march. This causes him to smile wide and chuckle softly. This causes Mei to look at him a bit confused. What? Izuku shakes his head. Nothing, I just remembered you made a Lego bomb at summer camp. Mei let out a huff, indignant at his remark. I fixed the issue on that baby. It won't explode unless I mean it to now. She stared at Izuku, her pupils dilating in and out, looking over him. You really want to be friends with me, even though I just cause people trouble? Mei fidgeted where she sat, her hands together with her thumbs twiddling. Izuku sighed and took Mei's hand, putting it in his own. You're not getting rid of me. We're gonna be a team, no matter what. Izuku clenched her hand hard, waiting for her response. Well, are you gonna leave me hanging pink? Or would you rather a pinky swear? Mei let out a small giggle at that, pulling her hand away and putting out her pinky finger. A greeny swear. Swear you won't stop being my friend. Izuku nodded, putting his other hand to his chin. Fine, but you have to pinky swear you won't try to make me not be your friend. It's a deal. The two linked pinkies, the two becoming that much more inseparable. None knew it, but this would become a catalyst for something great and terrible in years to come. The two began to catch up a bit as they hadn't seen each other in a week. And a week could feel like a long time without your best friend. They told Izuku how the teacher was forced to resign a few days after he left, something Izuku hadn't put together. He'd noticed the substitute teacher but thought the teacher was just out sick. Izuku told Mei about the books his dad got him. This subject didn't particularly interest Mei, but she listened nonetheless as she missed her friend now, her guilt mostly relieved after a good cry. Apparently Mei had been getting hounded by the bug-eyed bully a few times while Izuku was gone, a fact Izuku saved for another day. When the pair went back to class, as the bug-eyed boy walked by Izuku, he used a tendril to trip him, making sure it went unseen. Izuku finally noticed the sound of the boy's quirk. It was a buzzing sound overlapped with the sound of a cicada perhaps. Izuku was still new to the sounds of quirks, if they were sounds at all. The boy glared around the room filled with laughter, singling Izuku out, who was lost in thought, not laughing. Guess that was too obvious, huh? Izuku noticed the glare, figuring the boy would try for revenge sometime. When Izuku got home, his mood plummeted. His father had to leave again for a business trip to Thailand. And the bad news just kept coming. He was inviting Bakugo to his birthday party. His birthday was a few days ago, but because he was in the hospital, they'd had to put off a party. Izuku didn't want to see Bakugo, not after just been attacked by bullies last week. Not to mention Mei, who would have to meet Katsuki as well. Izuku grumbled to himself most of the night. But to put icing on the cake, Izuku had a nightmare. It was a world where he never go his quirk, where Get was treated like some useless idiot. They bullied him, taunted him, calling him a Deku. Katsuki beat him, and the boys who attacked him even told him to kill himself to save them the trouble. Izuku woke up with a yell, a phantom pain in his side from the broken rib he had suffered just a week or so ago. Izuku rubbed his side. It felt tender, but he knew it wasn't. In the dark of his room, he was alone with his thoughts. He replayed the remnants of the nightmare in his head as they faded, only to have them replaced by actual events. He could feel his chest tighten and his breathing quicken. Smoke began bellowing from his mouth. Why? Why him? Does he just have a target on his back? Do assholes just magnetically attract towards him as a punching bag? Both Katsuki and those boys, Morioha, Togati, and Vivani. They're trash, garbage. Flames began exiting Izuku's mouth, his fingers slowly extending into claw-like tendrils which dug into his sheets. If I hadn't fought back, I could have suffered more. Why can't they suffer? They don't care if they miss school. Vivani didn't even get in trouble. He made Mei, my friend, my pink, cry. Izuku's room glowed a sickly green. Izuku's eyes reflected the flames which were inhaled and exhaled again and again. Izuku smiled to himself, his mind racing as to how he could make the boys pay, all of them. This smile, however, didn't belong to Izuku Midoriya. Sitting in the vestige world, a man in a suit and white hair held onto a boy with green hair. The flesh of the man's hand began to melt and fuse onto the boy. The assimilation had begun and no one would be able to stop it. Deep inside an underground laboratory in the basement of Jaku General, an old man with a bushy mustache sat in a chair, while a man with white hair stood next to him looking over the old man's shoulder. My doctor, you've outdone yourself." The man smiled, his hands coming together in a slow clap. "Thank you, master. I myself am quite proud of this as well. But this will be able to make copies of quirks far easier than before. Shaving off a whole 6 months. Kahaha." The old man cackled in glee. Waving his arms, he spun around in his chair to look at his master. To see a quirk completely change into another, see that same quirk grow a new portion of itself. It's like watching a starfish regenerate. The old man adjusted his goggles and calmed himself. "By the way, master, your successor has made a request of me. I am unsure how to move forward with it, so I think your input is required." The white-haired man nods. "You see, he wants to learn about quirks and train his. I get the sense he didn't just mean the Hydra Flame quirk you made him either. What should we do?" The gentleman in the suit placed his hand to his chin in contemplation. With his eyes closed, he nods to himself before speaking. "You gave him access to Kurogiri, correct? Then I think it's time we start letting the boy spread his wings. Perhaps he and Tamura could become rivals of sorts. Have him begin practice in the steel chamber, it should suffice. As for teaching him of quirkology, I believe mixing it into tests of our own would best suit him. He is a clever boy. I'm sure he'd figure most of what is needed in a few years without our assistance." Chapter 8. A Reunion. The bomber returns. The next morning Izuku woke up groggy. The lack of good sleep, the emotional stress of the last few days getting to him. Luckily school was off today, some national holiday he hadn't had any interest in. But this meant he could sleep in, though this thought was interrupted by his phone going off. The Pink Menace. "Hey Green, your party is this weekend, right? Anything I should bring? My mom says she wants to be a good guest." "Oh, and what kind of present do you want? I could make you one." Izuku smiled. The image of Mei showing up to his party with a random invention was funny. Though he wasn't sure what to tell his friend, he hadn't put much thought into something he'd want, especially not from his friend. The Green Gremlin. "To be honest, I don't know what I'd want. And I think my mom has things covered, but I'll check." An almost instant reply was sent as Izuku was changing out of his PJs. The Pink Menace. Unhelpful. D. Izuku chuckled to himself, finding it both hilarious and slightly terrifying. He'd seen one of Mei's rampages, as her mother so lovingly called them, firsthand when he challenged her to see who could make a better toaster. Luckily, they have a fire extinguisher on hand since he and his dad both have fire quirks. The Green Gremlin. "I look forward to it. See you Saturday." The Pink Menace. Muhahaha. "See you O divided by." Izuku headed downstairs to the living room. Grabbing one of his tinkering sets for kids, he sat at the table. The faint sound of suction emanating from the kitchen. His mother's quirk attraction of small objects gave off this sound, which made sense to Izuku. He had noticed a few things about the sounds. They often had something to do with the quirk itself, however it didn't seem like that was an end-all be-all since Mei's didn't sound like a zooming in sound effect. He'd need a larger sample size to figure it out. "Izu, what did I say about tinkering at the table?" Inko had come out with plates full of eggs and bacon, breakfast enough for a small family like theirs. "No tinkering during dinner." Izuku pleaded his case, which only caused his mother's eyes narrow at him. "That applies to breakfast too. Didn't you get enough tinkering done last night? You were using your quirk and I thought I heard the sound of metal scrapping." Izuku jumped, staring at his mother like a deer caught in headlights. Don't think I didn't hear you. I know you don't have school today, but that doesn't mean you can stay up all night." Inko pointed a serving spoon at Izuku pointedly. Izuku was both thankful for the near miss and sad that he wouldn't be able to stay up late to do that exact thing now either. Izuku reluctantly put his tinkering kit down on the floor just as his father came down with his suitcases. "All right, all packed and my plane leaves in a few hours. Anyone want any souvenirs?" Izuku raised his hand. "Oh me, I want some hero merch. Oh, and a tied Japanese dictionary." Hisashi smirked at his son, still a bit predictable to what he'd asked for. Hisashi sat down his suitcases and fished something out of his suit jacket, handing it to Izuku. "I know it's a bit late for your birthday and a big early for the party, but I want you to open it before I leave." It was a thin box, about 3 inches wide and 9 inches long. It wasn't wrapped in the box was a plain black. Izuku smiled. He had a guess as to what was in it, but he was happy anyway, so he opened it. Inside the box was a watch. Not just any watch, but a support watch from his dad's company. It could be linked to his phone to take calls, use GPS, and even had a single-use taser in it for emergencies. His dad had probably gotten it after Izuku was attacked again, hoping to give him something to protect himself. The watch itself wasn't very eye-popping, however it wasn't ugly by any means. It had a mostly black exterior with a small circular screen with a silver rim around it. Beaming up at his dad, Izuku took the watch out and tried putting it on. He struggled to do so one-handed, but his dad leaned in and helped him. There, it looks good on you, little man. I'm sorry I'll miss the party, but happy birthday, son. Hasashi hugged his son, who immediately hugged him back. I'll miss you, Dad. Izuku hugged tighter as he said that, causing Hasashi to hug tighter as well. Me too, son. I'll miss you both very much. I'll be back before you know it, though. Izuku let his dad go so he could eat and head to the airport. Hasashi sat beginning to eat, while complimenting his wife's cooking. Inko smiled, giving an exasperated sigh, putting her hands on her hips. You'd like anything I make, even if it was bad. Hasashi's response to that comment was to keep eating. The family had one last meal together before getting split apart once more. Have a safe trip, and text me when you land. Inko leaned in, kissing her husband goodbye. Hasashi leaned into it, putting his arm around her waist, his leg bending back as cartoonishly as he could manage. Inko noticed and hit him playfully, breaking their embrace. Oh, all right, off with you then. I love you, Hisa. I love you too. Ink with one last peck on the cheek and hug to his son. Hasashi left for Taiwan. Izuku looked down at his tinkering kit and began to continue his current project, this kit bringing with it knowledge on circuitry. He wondered if he could fiddle with his new watch or if he should wait till he got better with it. A few days later, Mei and Izuku sat in the grass of the schoolyard looking up at the clouds, playing I Spy, which Mei was somehow winning despite it not being a competitive game. I spy with my dragon eye something yellow. The sun, dang it. I spy with my zooming eyes something metallic. Izuku scanned the sky above but was unable to see anything like that. He looked over to Mei, whose crosshairs were trained and zoomed into their maximum. No fair. You're using your quirk. Grandma says to use any advantage you have, no matter how small. Mei sticks her tongue out at Izuku while still focusing on what she was looking at. This left Izuku only one choice. He turned his body and tried to look exactly wherever Mei was looking, which led him to a dot in the sky. Is it a plane? No, you sound unsure. Cause it's not, but I can't remember the word for it. A drone. I think that's the word. How high up? Maybe a mile. 2 at most. Wonder what it's doing. No clue, not like we can reach it. Unless we want to try making an anti-air defense system. Izuku smirked, this remark getting Mei to shoot up in excitement. Can we? Mei bounced up and down, shaking Izuku, who was chuckling and nodding. Thus the two started on the world's first elementary school defense system, which they told no one about. After getting home from school, Izuku found himself surrounded on all sides. The Bakugos were waiting outside of his home while his mother was pushing him towards them with a hand on his back. Mitsuki had a big smile on her face as she waved to Inko and Izuku. Her husband, Masaru, carrying a few bags while wearing his own gentle grin. However, Katsuki was the only one without a smile, his arms crossed, almost glaring at Izuku. Nope, he was definitely glaring at Izuku. Sup, Inkai. Thanks for the roof, by the way. Yes, thank you, Inko. The Bakugo couple gave their thanks to their hostess as Inko and Izuku got up to them. Inko shook her head. We have the room and I'm not going to let you pay for a hotel just for a weekend. You are all more than welcome. Izuku let out an internal sigh. He stares at Katsuki, who hadn't said a word, only glaring at Izuku. That changed with a swat to the back of his head from Mitsuki. Say thanks, brat. Katsuki raged at his mother. Oi, don't hit me, hag. Hag, the hell are you calling a hag? As the two began to argue, Masaru guided them to the side to let Inko through to open the door. Izuku stared at the arguing pair with apprehension. He'd heard Katsuki was doing better, but he seemed like the same old Kaken he'd always known. What are you staring at, nerd? Izuku had stared too long, catching the attention of Katsuki. Mitsuki didn't let the nerd comment slide, however, giving him another swat upside the head. Oi, don't you be rude. We're guests. I'm calling it as I see it, hag. This again caused him to get smacked by his mother. Don't call me a hag. Where'd you even learn that word? Auntie Mitsuki, I don't really think nerd is an insult. Izuku stepped up, pulling on Mitsuki's sleeve. Both of the Bakugos paused, glancing back and forth between Izuku and each other. Mirroring each other, they both crossed their arms at the same time. All right, well, let me know if he steps out of line. Her scowl to her son switched back to a pleasant smile while talking to Izuku. Dragging her son through the door, Mitsuki quickly gave Inko a side hug as she walked by. Nice place, Inkai. Better than your old place by fair. Mitsuki glanced around the large open floor plan, the dining and living rooms having no wall between them, the kitchen right next to the front door, and the stairs upstairs just opposite the kitchen. I didn't like it at first, but it's grown on me. Having no wall between the dining room and living room is better for inviting people over. Not to mention the master bath is phenomenal. Mitsuki gives a jealous sigh at that. Masaru finally returning downstairs without the bags he had before. I noticed Hasashi isn't here. He raised an eyebrow, whilst prying apart his wife and son. Katsuki used this chance to bound to the couch and sit down, looking over the setup for any games. No, he left this morning. He sadly was not able to shift his schedule again. Boo, that guy needs to get another job already. I barely see him at all. Mitsuki stuck out her tongue in disapproval, while Inko shook her head in amusement. Suki, he just got a promotion. This is his first trip in months. Plus, if we'd had planned to do it last week, but things happened. Inko frowned as she trailed off, causing Mitsuki to scoff. What could have happened that pushed back your kid's birthday party? She crossed her arms and rolled her eyes. I've only known you to cancel cause of 2 reasons. Someone is dying or someone is pregnant. Wait, am I gonna be an aunt again? This caused Inko to sputter and wave her hands frantically. No, I'm not. We aren't, Suki, oh god. Inko blushed heavily, trying to guide the conversation away from that topic. Well, you didn't say much when you cancelled, so I've been dying to know, Inkai. Inko took a deep breath, but Izuku was the one to answer. I was in the hospital again. All eyes shifting to him as he spoke. What? I'm better now. Inkai, what the fuck? Why didn't you tell me? Mitsuki turned on her friend, her teasing mannerisms now gone. Well, between that and the lawsuit, you guys are getting sued. Inkai, you've got to keep me posted on stuff like this. Oh, no. We're suing the school Izuku transferred to. And why are you doing that? Inko hesitated for a moment, uncomfortable about the fact she hadn't told Suki about it. However, in her defense, she forgot that she didn't. Some jerks beat me up, Izuku said, grumbled as he sat down at the dining room table, a tinkering set in hand. Mitsuki was flabbergasted, her hands moving as her mouth flapped open and closed while looking back and forth between Inko and Izuku. Masaru patted Izuku on the head, ruffling his hair. Sorry that happened to you, Izuku. It must have been rough. On the couch, Katsuki clenched his fists, growling slightly. How'd you let some punks beat you up? What are you, a weakling? Izuku ignored Katsuki, not wanting to deal with him any more than he needed. Thanks, Uncle Masaru. It wasn't all that bad. I got a lot of reading done. Masaru smiled gently while his wife began scolding their son again. Izuku was getting tired of this back and forth already, but resolved himself to make it through the weekend without incident. After scolding her son, Mitsuki and Inko began discussing sleeping arrangements for the guests. Well, we have the couch in the guest room. Izu, do you want May to sleep over? Yeah, we just thought up project to work on, so I want to do as much as possible. Izuku smiled, bouncing up and down in his seat. Who's May? Katsuki asked incredulously. My best friend. Izuku spoke as if it was obvious, but Katsuki didn't seem to get it. No, I'm your best friend. We've been friends since forever. Katsuki in turn spoke as if Izuku was mistaken, trying to correct his mistake. But we haven't seen each other in months. The brunette looked utterly baffled as to how Katsuki thought Izuku would see him as his best friend. So, we were gonna be heroes together. You can't just back out. Katsuki frowned at Izuku. He had been looking forward to seeing his best friend again after so long, but his best friend hadn't reacted like he should. Why would I want to be a hero with you? You beat me up. Izuku glared at Katsuki, his reptilian pupils narrowing as well. The adults in the room could only glance back and forth at this spat, none of them entirely sure what to do. The Bakugos wanted to rekindle their son's friendship with Izuku, but it wasn't going as smoothly as they'd hoped. Katsuki had gotten a hold on his rage after starting his meds, but it seemed he never thought Izuku wouldn't be his best friend after what he did. Inko decided to stop watching and stepped forward. However, Katsuki got off one last remark before she stopped the boy. It's your fault for making me mad. This made Izuku start to bellow smoke from his mouth. All right, you two. Enough. You're both right and you're both wrong. Katsuki, Izuku hasn't seen you in months and you can't expect him not to make friends at a new school. Izuku, we talked about why that happened, didn't we? Izuku nodded, glancing to his aunt slightly guiltily. He's getting treatment like I am. Izuku looked down at his feet, unable to look his mother in the eye. Fine, but they better be cool. Katsuki huffed, looking away indignant. Anyway, Izuku, would you mind if May stayed in your room? Oh, what if we slept in the living room? Inko pondered the request for a moment before nodding. Only if you don't tinker all night. I'll come down to check on you, and if you're still up, you'll have your kits taken away. Okay. Izuku smiled, whilst Katsuki pointed to himself. What about me? I want to sleep in the living room. Inko glanced back to the Bakugo couple, who both shrugged. We'll see. It'll depend on how you get along with May. Katsuki frowned and nodded, deciding not to give his aunt a hard time. Inko turned back to the Bakugo couple, continuing their conversation from before. You two will have the guest room, though Masaru has already put your things up there, so it's a done deal. Mitsuki nodded while Masaru sat down in a chair, looking over to Izuku's kitten object Curiosity. Say, Inko, what's Izuku messing with? Izuku by now had trudged back to the table to continue his kit, his mood much more somber than before. Oh, due to him being in the hospital for a month, he had so much free time we gave him school materials to catch up. Well, we accidentally gave him materials from higher grades which he absorbed like a sponge. So to keep him within his age group, we're kind of distracting him with other things like laws, engineering, and business. Masaru nods, seeing the wisdom in keeping Izuku within those of his own age. He won't grow conceited as quickly. And if his mind is distracted by other subjects, he is still learning something at school. Sounds good in theory, but don't you think you're stunting his growth a bit? We did have that conversation already actually. However, we want Izuku to grow up well-rounded. He might be smart, but he needs to learn to interact with those his own age. We'll let him advance more when he's older, and courses give that freedom. Mitsuki was watching her son, a tinge of concern in her eyes. As she listened to Inko go on about her son, she couldn't help but feel jealous. She had a plan. All Mitsuki had ever done was react and have ideas for her son's future, but nothing so detailed as to affect how he'd develop. Katsuki wasn't an idiot, but he wasn't a genius. He was athletic, but wasn't a track star. His quirk was flashy, but you didn't have much beyond force. Mitsuki was bothered by this, often trying to spur her son on with high expectations. Mitsuki knew Masaru wasn't the active type. He was the soft touch in their house, but it wasn't as though he didn't put his foot down when needed. "Inkai, how do you do it?" Mitsuki sighed, slumping forward onto the table. Inko smirked, reaching out and petting her best friend. "I'm raising Izuku, not Katsuki, so don't try to raise Izuku when you have Katsuki." "Okay, perfect parents don't exist," says the perfect parent. Masaru snidely chimes into the conversation, which gets a snort from his wife and a pair of puffed-up pouty cheeks from Inko. "Fine, I'll stop comforting your wife for you, Masa. All yours." Inko crosses her arms, which causes Mitsuki to look up with her own pout. "Why are you taking it out on me? I'm innocent." Mitsuki cried in mock sadness. "You laughed. The punishment fits the crime." Inko looks away, a sly grin on her face. Inkai bitch Mitsuki, the picture-perfect adult, sticks her tongue out at her best friend. "Hey, language honey. Children are present." Masaru chides lightly. Yeah. So what are we doing for fun? I'm not here just to play babysitter number 3. Mitsuki turns her head to the side to face Inko. "Well, I'm okay with light drinks and chatting, maybe a few board games." Inko gestures to the shelf next to the television. "Sounds cool. Will this May girl have her folks with her too?" Masaru pointed out just to be sure. I hope it's her grandmother. She's nice, and I get the sense she's got a wild side. Sounds like a good drinking buddy." Mitsuki snapped, her hand making a finger gun at Inko. "Well, we might find out." Inko shrugs, not particularly caring about that side of things. That night Izuku couldn't sleep. He didn't understand why. He had a pretty normal day, but even by 11 he was still wide awake. Having nothing to do, he fished for his phone and tried to see if May was up working on something. "The birthday greenie, you awake?" "The birthday greenie. Wait, when did you change my name?" A minute passed with no answer, but just as Izuku put his phone down, he got a response. "The Pink Menace, this morning, lesser than." "The birthday greenie, a bit inaccurate, but I'll let it slide. Anyway, what are you working on?" "The Pink Menace, your present. I'm finishing the final touches now." "The birthday greenie, pink. Why are you staying up so late for that?" "I don't need it tomorrow." "The Pink Menace, BRRT wrong. This baby is gonna be super relaxing for you. I just know it." "The birthday greenie, relaxing. Alright, you've piqued my curiosity now." "The Pink Menace, nope. Sorry, it's a surprise." "The birthday greenie, hint. Give me a hint." "The Pink Menace, it has to do with one of your mumblings. Or at least what I could piece together from it." Izuku blinked at that, a bit confused. "The birthday greenie, mumblings. The Pink Menace, has no one told you that you mumble when you're working through something? You were mumbling about music this morning. ****. Izuku tried to think back to school this morning and could only remember thinking about the different quirk sounds he was hearing and how sometimes they make music. "The birthday greenie, I don't remember that, but if you say so." "Music related, huh?" "The Pink Menace, dang it. You better still be surprised. Plus deg hashtag plus plus plus." "The birthday greenie, I will. I'm interested to see what you made. Remember when I told you about Katsuki? His family arrived early and are staying here too." "The Pink Menace, the bomber guy. I'll have to bring a shield. Do you think I can dilute his sweat with a spray bottle?" "The birthday greenie. XD, you're gonna spray him like a cat. Use salt water, it'll be safest, I think." "The Pink Menace, do you think he'll like my babies? He sounds kinda mean though." "The birthday greenie. Maybe, he might just need to see the uses in them." "This is gonna suck." "The Pink Menace, worry not, my friend. You won't be alone. Plus we can always complain to your mom." "The birthday greenie, thanks May." "The Pink Menace, not a problem. You've got my back and I've got yours." A soft smile danced across Izuku's face and disappeared when he saw the time. "The birthday greenie, alright, we should both go to bed. Good night, Pink." "The Pink Menace, fine. Good night, Green HH." After talking with his friend, he found himself relaxed. He hadn't realized how high-strung he'd been all day. Soon enough, he was struggling to even keep his eyes open. Sleep took Izuku, but only a few miles away, May was hard at work trying to get her last present to Izuku to work. The other two were working fine, she just couldn't get the antennas to calibrate properly on this one. It wasn't until she had taken a break to respond to Izuku that she got it working. All that electrical work had paid off in spades. She wiped her brow and flopped onto a beanbag to sleep for the night. Chapter 9. 3 is a crowd. Izuku awoke on his bed like any other day. However, unlike every other day, a package was sitting in the middle of the floor. He could hear what was inside, but this didn't make him feel any comfort. I should open it right. Izuku focused on the sounds in the box, trying to gauge their purposes and number. He thought he could hear 3 sounds overlapping. One a static pulsating, another a typing sound constant, and a third with a strange echo effect. Listening to the sounds, Izuku decided to use this as a chance to guess the quirks within the box. He started with the pulsing static. First, let's break down sound its pulsing in sounds. Like static, perhaps this makes a tame or transformation the static couldn't. Towards radiofictor, perhaps a mind-affecting quirk. Ithistobe something galong those lines no for thesecund it's constant. Sound means it's stable, so perhaps a mutation quirk, though it sounds like to pingsame. Is something technology relate, but those are usually. Emitter which contradicts the mutation guess, perhaps a thastidoeth more than like. Logging information yet that sounds right, no thyschoid sounds like it's copying both. Off the other quirks like arsonansis, so perhaps it's copy ability. I'd wager mutation based on theconstant sound, but that's word fits per minute. Izuku's mind was fully dedicated to the task, the process of talking to himself helping him formulate hypotheses on each quirk. The only thing left was to test them by opening the box. And so the boy got up and picked up the unmarked box. Inside was 3 vials packed in styrofoam and a letter. Sitting back on the bed, Izuku examined the letter. A present. You should learn the feeling of different types of quirks, so 2 of these are quirks you have yet to appropriate yourself. Based on your ability to hear quirks, I recommend stopping before reading on to guess what the quirks do and which is which. The third quirk is a very unique case. As you can give and take quirks, it will leave evidence behind, so this quirk was fashioned to be able to replicate a quirk in its entirety, much like a printer would. Feel no guilt for taking a quirk, as you can now have a copy for yourself. These vials can also be used to contain quirks who become unwieldy. Do use them wisely. We are giving you these as both a present and a show of trust. Since you requested to learn from the doctor, you first must prove you can be trusted with his knowledge. Izuku turned the paper over to read the back, still digesting the information from the former page. He had been given confirmation that he would be taught. He was conflicted, unsure how to feel about it, knowing his future mentor likely wasn't a good person. These are the details on the quirks. Be sure to use them well. Quirk, encyclopedia, mutation type. This quirk enhances the user's mental capacity for information. Memory is becoming easier to recall. It seems to work on the all memory except working memory, giving no boost to cognitive function overall. However, it will cause an individual to almost never forget traumatic events. Quirk, radio waves, emitter type. This quirk allows the production of electromagnetic waves on the slow side of the spectrum. Radio waves can be produced as well as stored and released in a quick pulse to disrupt electronics. Directional release requires fine control as well as the translation of thoughts to waves. This quirk is quite technical in its usage curve, so study on the subject is recommended. A side effect of the quirk is the ability to interpret radio waves. This, however, is as difficult as learning a new language to a user given the quirk. Quirk copier vial. This vial contains a subject which can serve as a copier for quirks you wish to have without taking them from an individual permanently. Do not take the copying quirk into yourself. Doing so will break it. This quirk requires about a minute to create a copy, and only after a full day of photosynthesis or nutrients. The strain on the subject is immense, so do not force multiple quirks into it at a time. Now Izuku was confused. Was Shigaraki a villain or not? He had thought so based on how the vestige spoke, but he was unsure now. Maybe he should just ask. Then next he sees the vestige. He did seem to encourage Izuku in a certain direction, but that didn't mean he was forcing him. Izuku took out the mutation quirks vial. He saw a similar apparatus like the last time, used one of these, which allowed him to put his finger in to take the quirk. He did so, reaching out to the amorphous thing and snagging it for himself. The feeling of something clicking into place filled his body. He imagined a bookshelf and slid the quirk onto it for safekeeping. Best not to use it now. There may be a sudden change and people will notice. He looked down to the other vial, slowly reaching out to it. Radio waves, huh? I think I read about them. I guess it'd be fun to add a new subject to tinker with. Doing the same as with the other quirk, he took it from the vial and placed the quirk onto his internal bookshelf. The last vial, he took out and sat it on his bed. This vial was slightly different, having 3 segments each with a finger entrance stopper on them. To Izuku, it looked less like a vial and more like a triple gun barrel he'd seen in a video game. The vial was labeled copier, copied, and copy on each of the 3 sides. This is cool. Makes it hard to stay suspicious. The young boy grumbled to himself. Taking the box, he felt a weight still there and removed the styrofoam to see a small holder for the 3 vials. making them seem like All Might merchandise which could sit in the light. Letting out an internal squeal, Izuku took the All Might-themed panel out and looked it over. It would fit quite innocuously with his other posters and toys. The panel had a metal plate perpendicular to it on the bottom that it balances on. It was just thick enough to hide the vials within. Izuku took them and sat them in the holder, then placed the holder on the desk in the sun. Wait, how did this get in here? Izuku sat at the table, which was absolutely packed in comparison to normal. The Bakugos sat on one side with Izuku and Inko on the other. Izuku had woken up at the perfect time. Breakfast was ready and he was the last one downstairs. Still wearing his All Might-themed pajamas, he sat and eyed his breakfast. So what time will this Mei girl get here? Mitsuki glanced to Inko. Around noon. Seems her dad will be dropping her off. He wanted to at least meet the two of you since Mei is going to stay over. Inko replied, putting a bite of pancake in her mouth. Careful man, I like him already. Masaru chimes in, polishing off his plate. Well, that's the minimum for letting your kids stay over. Mitsuki points out. True, but there are worse parents. Masaru got a bit of an uncomfortable look from Mitsuki in response, which he squeezed her hand to soothe her a bit. He's a nice man, a bit conservative but not suffocatingly. Inko injected, taking a sip of her juice. Bakugo meanwhile was finished his meal and grumbling that he wasn't allowed to get up until everyone ate. This wasn't Inko's rule but his dad's, but Inko didn't mind it since she wasn't his parent. Mom, can I tinker until Mei gets here? Izuku asked, trying to finish his food quickly so he'd have more time to tinker. No, you may read though. I figure you and Mei will try to tinker all day, so at least wait till she gets here. You can use the tablet. Izuku snapped to look at her with those words. Yay, tablet. Izuku raises his fork and cheer. What's so great about a tablet? Bakugo asked. Seeing his friend so excited had made him curious. I can read anything I want with it, know just what's in a book. Plus I can take notes too. Izuku beamed. Isn't that just school? Bakugo cocked his head in confusion. Why would you want more school? Izuku inhaled sharply, gasping at the remark. You don't like school, Katsuki? Katsuki shook his head. No. What weirdo likes school? It's not weird. It's fun to learn something. Izuku retorted. Mitsuki snort sounds like Lil Izu takes after his mom. I remember when I had to drag Inko out of the library for lunch. And I remember having to stop you from starting fights with every upperclassman who looked at you funny. Inko glared indignant at her friend. In Kai you could slug with the best of them. Oh, I remember the time you pulled out Shifuya's tooth. Inko took an empty bottle of syrup and threw it at her friend. I was aiming for her retainer. Masaru looked to the two boys and spoke in a whisper. Your mothers were quite the troublemakers. Be sure to be better than them. This got him a bottle to the head as well, the bottle floating back to Inko's hand for her to reload. Oops, my hand slipped. Inko gave a kind smile which didn't reach her eyes. I want to be like mom and auntie. Kicking ass. Bakugo cheered, however his language got him shut down immediately as Mitsuki took Inko's empty syrup bottle and threw it at him too. Watch your language, young man. Bakugo bared his teeth at Mitsuki, glaring at her. Izuku watched the chaos, thinking to himself, who do I want to be like? Izuku, I'm bored. Let's do something. Katsuki complained as Izuku sat on his couch reading about radio waves. Bakugo shook Izuku's shoulder, trying to get the boy to move. Come on, put that stupid tablet down and let's go play outside. Bakugo tried to grab the tablet, but Izuku held it away from him. Fine, but we're going to the park. We still have a bit before Mei gets here. Izuku put down the tablet and went to get changed. You go tell our parents. Izuku got changed slowly, not particularly excited to be playing with S bothersome person like Katsuki. Returning downstairs, he found Katsuki and his uncle Masaru waiting for him by the door. Izuku, put your shoes on, else Cat here will run out the door without us, haha. Masaru ruffled his son's hair a bit before the three walked to the nearby park. Izuku heard a strange sound from his uncle. It was almost sizzling, but not quite. It wasn't a constant sound like a mutation quirk, but something similar. Izuku wasn't sure what to make of it. Uncle Masaru, what's your quirk? Izuku pulled on the man's sleeve to get his attention. Oh, it's called acid sweat. I can sweat acid. Why? Are you gonna put me in your notebook? Masaru gave a light tease toward Izuku, which the boy promptly ignored. No, I was just curious. Is it a mutation quirk? Or emitter? It's an emitter type. But come on, slowpokes, hurry up. Katsuki yelled, standing outside the park waiting for the two trailing behind. Izuku slumped forward a bit and sighed, deciding to indulge Katsuki for the sake of his mood. Coming. With that, Izuku ran forward, the two boys running into the park. Izuku and Katsuki began to play like they did before the move, looking for beetles, exploring the small park area, and even playing heroes and villains with Izuku as the villain as per usual. Katsuki was having fun. He had missed his friend, and the other kids back home weren't very interesting. Izuku, on the other hand, found himself going through the motions, wishing Katsuki could just leave already. Come on, Deku. Katsuki, that's not my name. Well, hurry up then. You'll never be a hero if you can't even run. Katsuki smirked, jeering at Izuku. As time went on, Izuku was having less fun and Katsuki was now becoming annoyed. He even tried to use his quirk on Izuku once or two, which was met with a scolding from Masaru and a spicy taste in Izuku's mouth. Izuku was about to rest for a bit when he heard a rustling behind him. He peeked behind the bush and saw a blonde girl biting into a bird that was struggling in her grip. It struggled and died in her hands. Izuku leaned in and caused a bit of rustling, which caused the girl to turn to look. Her eyes were slitted like his own, but hers were more cat-like than lizard. She pulled the bird close to her and tried to hide it, her mouth a bit bloody. "Oh hi," Izuku waved, trying not to scare the girl. He wasn't repulsed, strangely enough, maybe because her quirk was like a heartbeat pushing blood through the body. It also had a faint echo to it, though it was small. The girl looked at him cautiously, tears in her eyes. "You didn't see it, did you?" She spoke softly. "I know, if you didn't want me to at least." Izuku raised his hands and shook his head. "Izuku, we have to go. Tatsumi will be there soon." Masaru yelled towards Izuku. "Kae," Izuku replied before turning to the girl. "I like your eyes, they're like mine." Izuku smiled, pointing to his eyes. "See you around." "Oh, I'm Izuku." He turned to leave, but heard a faint response. "Himiko Toga." It was soft, but Izuku thought he could hear a sniffle as he ran off back to Masaru and Katsuki. Upon arriving home, Izuku got a sense of deja vu, seeing someone at his house he wasn't expecting. A fairly buff man with red dreadlocks stood with a cart of boxes at his door, talking to his mother. Between the two were Mei, looking back and forth, while his aunt noticed them from behind his mom and waved. The wild group turned to see the others returning. The man had yellow eyes like Mei, but not her crosshairs. Instead, he had a metal ring around each eye. "And there they are now." Inko waved as well, the red-haired man keeping his stern face while the group approached. Bakugo was the first to speak, much to the terror of those who know him. "So you're Mei. Your eyes look weird." Bakugo stared at the girl, narrowing his own eyes as she did the same, now glaring at him for his remark. "HMPH, I don't like you." The man that was likely her father patted the girl. "Now Mei, don't be rude back. Ignore them or work through it." The girl looked up at the man and then looked to the ground. "The name's Hatsume. Nice to meet you. Now introduce yourself to Katsuki." Mitsuki insisted from inside. "Yeah, I know. I'm Bakugo Katsuki." The boy barked out. Izuku walked up near the man and gave a light bow. "It's nice to see you again, Mr. Hatsume. Thank you for letting Mei come over." The man gave a nod to Izuku. "Thanks for being friends with my daughter. I hope you like her gifts." The man motioned to the cart. "Gifts? Mei, don't tell me you made multiple." Izuku turned to Mei, exasperation all over his face, but now beaming in joy. "Well, I've got an appointment to make. Inko, let me know if you need me to pick her up early." The red-haired man pulled the cart up next to the door and turned to his daughter. "Be good, have fun, and call if you need anything." He hugged her before Izuku could continue his scolding. "Okay, Dad. I love you." Mei hugged her dad back. Inko stepped forward and grabbed the cart handle. "I'll let you know if anything comes up, Yaren. Your daughter is in good hands. If she seems like a nice kid." Mitsuki supports, giving a thumbs up to the man, which elicits a smirk on his otherwise stern face. The man turns, leaving, giving a nod to Masaru as he walks by, getting on his motorcycle and driving off. Mitsuki gives a long sigh as she deflates. "I felt like I was going through an interview." "Masa, you lucked out." The three just arrived stood a bit confused as Mei let out a giggle. "Dad is intense when it comes to family." Inko nods, knowing how her own husband can get when family is involved. "Well, come on, Pink. We've got a party to start." Izuku grabs his friend's hand and guides her inside. The collection of kids and adults settling in so the festivities can begin. Open it, open it. I know you're going to love it." "Big one first." Mei jumped up and down, her dreads faintly bouncing with her. "I still can't believe you made 3. Don't tell me you stayed up even later last night." Mei looked away, her smile never leaving her face as she didn't make eye contact. "Just shut up and open it, nerd." Bakugo let off a small crackle in his hands, getting annoyed at the obvious closeness Mei and Izuku had. With a glare and a sigh, Izuku began to open the present. He tore off the wrapping paper to see a case of some kind. The 3 parents stood nearby, recording the whole thing to send to various others. "Go on, Izu, pop it open." His mother encouraged him, a smirk on her face. She knew what these were since Mei's mom wanted to make sure it was okay her daughter was building this for her son. With a click and a squeal from Mei as he lifted the lid, Izuku blinked in slight confusion. He wasn't entirely sure what this was. He looked it over carefully. A box with knobs, sliders, and buttons, as well as 2 antennae on each end. Izuku looked between Mei and the device before him, recalling her text from last night. "You built this. It's really cool." He wasn't too sure how to play it, but he knew it was a complicated thing to make. So he hugged his friend, who was beaming ear to ear with a smug grin. "You like it?" She hugged back, her smug grin going nowhere. "It's amazing. I can't wait to learn how to play it." Izuku nodded, then pulled away to open the next one. This one was small, a rectangular block with buttons and a segmented board on the bottom, as well as a stylus attached by a wire. Izuku knew what this one was. He'd found one in his dad's closet back at the old apartment but wasn't allowed to play with it. I'm sensing a theme of electronic instruments, May. It's a stylophone, right? May nodded in response. May, this is too much. You better expect a gift in return. Izuku stuck out his tongue, already planning his revenge. Nope, I refuse. May made an X with her hands, shaking her head no adamantly. Izuku sighed, deciding to open the last of May's gifts. This one was thin and long compared to the others. Opening it, he found a music note with All Might hair and a grin. An All Might-themed automaton. Izuku instantly grabbed it and hugged it to his chest. I love it. Izuku looked around. The adults were all smiles. The Bakugos, save the youngest, looked impressed at May's ability to build while Katsuki was staring at the automaton with a hint of jealousy while grumbling to himself. My gift is way better than hers, Katsuki declared, pulling out a stereotypical present box. Bring it on. My babies are the best of the best. May opened and closed her hand, challenging Katsuki to a present off. Izuku looked back and forth between the pink gremlin and the bomber. He wasn't sure if he was the focus anymore, but he didn't particularly mind it. He was finally enjoying himself and he was happy to be surrounded by people he cared for, well except Katsuki. He was still unsure on that front. Taking the gift from the flight risk, he opened it to reveal an All Might hoodie, one in his newest theme. He pulled it out of the box, a smile on his face as he measured it against himself. Thank you, Katsuki. This is great. Katsuki smirked but cleared his throat. It's not for wearing, look at the front. Izuku flipped it, his jaw dropping as he saw what was there. But a second later he saw something that made his excitement ice over. To Deku, you can do it plus ultra. All Might. Izuku forced himself to smile. He didn't want to leave a trace of his true feelings towards the child whom he was infuriated with. Thanks, Kaken. He beamed, carefully placing the hoodie down and hugging the boy who hugged back. The only person who could see Izuku's face as he hugged Katsuki was May, who stared in confusion. Izuku was smiling, but she was sure it wasn't a happy one. She felt like she'd seen the intense look in his eyes before. Whenever they talked about Vivani, his eyes would always look scary. May bit her lip. Something wasn't right, but she couldn't tell what was bothering her friend. Hey, do you want to play with the instruments? She asked, holding up the two lighter ones. Bakugo turned and looked at the instruments, scoffing. Who'd play with instruments? Weirdo. The victory already going to his head. He was smug. Izuku, however, took the automaton. Turning it on, began to mess with it a bit. Thanks, Pink. I appreciate it. Izuku had never meant those words more than right now. He was convinced that if May wasn't here, he'd have attacked Katsuki. May beamed. No problem. You can always count on me, Green. Bakugo stood between the two a bit awkwardly. He wasn't sure what to do. He thought he'd won, but Izuku was still entertaining this girl's stupid ideas. Why was she even here? She should have just left after losing so he and Deku could play. But instead Izuku was playing with her toys. Katsuki blinked as a box was put in his hands. The stylophone. Here, hold this while I set up the theremin for you. You seem like you'd like that more. May turned on her heels, getting the assistance of Masaru to set up the theremin. Izuku sat, staring into the void as his hands moved for him, the automaton feeling fairly natural in his hands. He listened to the sounds around him, the most annoying sound overlapping with his current favorite. His hands moved faster as his thoughts drifted. Soon he realized everyone was staring at him and he stopped. The adults in the room, specifically the two mothers, began clapping, but Izuku hadn't quite caught up yet. That was beautiful, Izu. I didn't know you could play. Mitsuki nudged Inko, who was clapping right alongside her. My baby boy has musical talent. Wait, we didn't record that. Nu and Ko stopped clapping and fell to her knees dramatically as Mitsuki gave a hearty belly laugh. Izuku hadn't even meant to, but apparently he'd played a song on the automaton while deep in thought. Katsuki was staring at his friend, both shocked and a tad bit jealous. He looked down at the stylophone in his hands and then to May. Hey, how does this thing work? May, who had the theremin mostly set up, had also paused to watch Izuku, a silent pride in herself and in her friend. Masaru, however, had completely stopped, staring at Izuku and clapping, his eyes misty with tears. That was beautiful. He wiped his tears and plugged in the theremin, which began to self-calibrate. May turned to Bakugo. The stylophone uses that stylus to touch the board to produce different pieces, while the theremin here uses these antennae. One controls pitch and the other volume. Katsuki grunted, trying to turn on the stylophone to play. He struggles with all the buttons but then finally finds the on switch. Taking the stylus, he runs it across the board on the bottom, trying to mimic Izuku's music. Katsuki was not, in fact, a musical prodigy, as the sounds he was making were really bad. The boy's face began to contort in anger. His palms produced an explosion which damaged the stylophone. He threw it to the ground and began stomping on it, much to the shock of everyone in the room, especially May. My baby, stop it, stop. May rushed over, pushing Katsuki back onto the couch as she grabbed the now broken stylophone. Katsuki, Bakugo, go upstairs, now. Surprisingly, these words weren't from Mitsuki but the ever-passive Masaru. who was now seething at his son for do such a thing not only to someone else's gift but in front of the person who made it as well. Bakugo had never heard his father raise his voice at him, so it had shocked him out of his anger but only momentarily. Why am I the only one who thinks this is weird? Deku and his weirdo friend are making things that they shouldn't be able to. Why is she even here? Explosions crackled along his palms as he glared at Mei, who was cradling her baby, tears now threatening to break from her eyes. Among the chaos, Inko was the only person to notice a bout of green come off of Izuku. The boy was staring at Bakugo with a look she hadn't seen on her son's face before. Izuku's breathing was heavy and his reptilian eyes were slitted and sharp. Inko was about to call out to him when he stood. However, whatever he was about to do was stopped by Mei grabbing Katsuki's collar. What the hell were you thinking? That stylophone was my baby. How could you do that to my baby? Would you do that to someone else's baby? Mei began shaking the boy, tears rolling down her face. Masaru placed a hand on her shoulder. Hatsune, I'm sorry for my son's actions, but would you let us handle it? Mei snapped back to glare at Masaru but looked down thoughtfully. Fine. She took the destroyed remains of her baby and walked to Izuku. Izuku was glaring at Katsuki as he was dragged upstairs. Mei nudged him and offered the scrap to him. Want to try to salvage it? Izuku looked down at it and back to Mei, a mix of sadness and anger on his face. Yeah, let's try. Izuku nodded as he felt a hug from behind. His mother was hugging him, leaning over the couch. She said nothing while his auntie Mitsuki came around the other side and gave a bow. I'm also sorry for my son's actions. I'm sure you put a lot of work into that gift. Mei looked back to the remains of the stylophone and sighed. I did, but I can take this chance to improve it with Izuku. Mitsuki let out a small sigh of relief. This, however, didn't last long. Auntie, I'm sorry. I tried, but I can't be friends with him. Inko hugged her son tighter. Izuku stared firmly at Mitsuki. I didn't want to make you feel sad, but I can't pretend anymore. Mitsuki bit her lip, wincing in pain. She had hoped her son had improved a bit, but after what he just did, she couldn't blame it on his eat anymore. He hadn't been as violent, but he hadn't calmed either. To be completely honest, if Mei hadn't acted first, I don't know what I would have done. Izuku exhaled a bout of flame as he spoke these words, a sign of his emotional state. I'm sorry we pushed you to stay friends. I know Katsuki isn't bad deep down, but his actions aren't reflecting that. I think it's best if we leave. Mitsuki patted Izuku's head and looked to Inko before walking upstairs, a bitter look on her face. There was no yelling. There was only a bitter goodbye between parents and friends. Inko hugged her best friend tightly as she did with her son, whispering something in her ear before caressing her cheek, Mitsuki holding back tears and nodding in response. Katsuki had been walked put by Masaru holding his arm. Every time he tried to speak, his father glared at him, which caused him to close his mouth. Masaru had thoroughly cowed the boy. He watched the boy get into the car, frowning at him all the while. The father then walked over to Izuku and Mei, who were already taking the stylophone apart. I didn't get to say this before, but happy belated birthday, Izuku. I hope despite what's happened you've had a good one. Izuku let a smile dance across his face. Thank you, Uncle Masaru, and I hope you'll be well. Masaru gave a side hug to the boy and a look to Mei. Next time I'd love to hear more about your babies, as you call them. Mei almost knocked over her chair with how fast she got up, her hand on the table, and beaming she almost shouted, I can't wait. The enthusiasm startled Masaru a bit, but he gave a slightly twitching smile in response, feeling he said something he'd regret later. With that, he went upstairs to quickly pack the bags. Mitsuki was the next visitor to the pair. Izuku stooped his tinkering and instead got up to hug his aunt. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings, Auntie. I do want to see you and Uncle again. Mitsuki, who had been feeling a slew of complex emotions about the situation, quickly hugged the boy back. Thank you, Izuku, and happy birthday. You're growing up into a fine boy already. Be a good boy for your mom and dad, okay? She ruffled the boy's fluffy hair and then looked to Mei. I hope you can fix it. It sounded pretty good. Mei nodded, giving a smile to the nice lady. If not, we'll build it from scratch. Mitsuki smirked at this. Make it blast-proof if you do. Mei's eyes went wide, ideas already filling her noggin with the term blast-proof. Mitsuki turned to walk away, stopping by Inko to give one last hug before stepping outside, followed by Masaru not long after. Inko stood in the doorway waving as the Bakugo family left, only to mutter to herself, I should have sent some cake home with them. Chapter 10, Interlude. The Bakugos, the Togas, and the father on business. Masaru closed the door behind him as he pushed his son into the guest room of the Midoriya household. Turning to his son, he gave the fiercest glare he could muster as he walked up the boy and slapped him. The hell is wrong with you? The boy, for his part, was stunned. He felt his cheek as the stinging pain pulsated through the side of his face. His mother had hit him before, but never hard enough to actually hurt. It also was mostly her personality. She'd do the same to her friends or his dad when they said something dumb or embarrassed her. His father, however, was a completely different story. Katsuki had never seen the man raise a hand to anyone nor raise his voice. Well, are you going to answer, or am I going to have to list each fuck up in order? The older man ceased, awaiting his son's response. I don't know. The stupid thing just wouldn't do as I slap another open-handed smack to the face was the father's response. I asked about you, not the stylophone you destroyed. Why the hell did you think it was a good idea to destroy something that wasn't yours? Was a gift to the friend you were so excited to see, and a gift from another guest who put serious effort into making it. Katsuki, I'm beyond disappointed in you. I'm appalled at your behavior. We are leaving now, and you will not say a word until we are all in the car. Do you understand? But it was his defense was cut short by a glare from the man. I have been patient with you. However, your management meds have already kicked in, and you continue to act like the world revolves around you and resort to tantrums and violence when you don't get your way. From today on, I won't tolerate it. You've proven you can't even go to a simple birthday party and be happy for your friend, so we'll be finding you an outlet whether you like it or not. Katsuki had lost all his nerve in front of his father's unyielding wrath. Yes, sir. He slumped forward listening to his father's lecture. He knew he could challenge his mom on certain things, but his dad seemed like a completely different person now. Grab what you want for the drive home. Then without even saying a word, you'll be escorted to the car. Katsuki grabbed his stuff and was unceremoniously dragged by the arm to the car. He went to complain about his rough treatment, but each time he opened his mouth, his father glared at him. His mother had come upstairs while he was packing and began to cry. He didn't understand why she was, but it made him feel guilty. He couldn't stop thinking about it while he sat in the car. It's not your fault. Mitsuki wanted to grab her friend, hug her and cry against her as she whispered those words into her ear, but instead she nodded. Inko caressed her cheek and gave a gentle smile. She could read her friend like a book. Mitsuki had a bit of a complex about this. She felt guilt for being the reason her son had IED. She felt guilt because if she hadn't passed it on to him, his actions wouldn't hurt people, wouldn't have put his best friend and the son of her best friend in the hospital. Inko was her family, a sister to her when her family tossed her out. Knowing that her son had done something like that in an IED episode killed her inside. Seeing her son crush Izuku's present, made by Izuku's first other friend besides her son, made her feel like a failure all over again. She wasn't sure this was an IED episode at all or just plain anger, but regardless, her son's words and actions were harmful. Izuku's and Mei's words had comforted her a bit, but she still struggled not to cry. The silence in the car ride home was the worst. She wasn't sure if she could manage words without breaking down. However, a warmth made itself known. Her husband placed his hand on hers as he drove, squeezing it gently. He mouthed, "Are you okay?" to her, and she shook her head, mouthing, "Not really." He squeezed a bit harder, giving a soft smile in return. She inhaled and exhaled to collect herself before addressing her son in the back seat. "I'm sure your father has already scolded you, so I won't yell. But I want to put something to you in case you were unaware. Izuku has made it clear that he doesn't intend to invite you back next year." What? But he's my friend, Katsuki cried, unable to understand that he was in the wrong. "You may see him as your friend, but he doesn't see you as his," replied, her voice shaking a bit. "But our promise. We promised to be heroes together. You broke that promise, Katsuki. You were a villain today." If Katsuki could see his mother's face, he wouldn't have continued, but alas, he could not. "No, I wasn't. That girl was stealing Deku from me. He betrayed me. It's his fault. Isn't hers." Bakugo was fuming at this point. Her couldn't hear how he was making his mother cry. "I really am a failure," Mitsuki muttered to herself, Masaru caressing her cheek to wipe away the tears. "Katsuki," his father spoke, stern and precise, causing Katsuki to straighten up a bit. "Be quiet." He obeyed, and then he heard his mother sobbing lightly. Katsuki wasn't sure why, but he felt like it was his fault. He couldn't understand why his mother was crying. The car ride was painful and long, but home wasn't much better after that. Home. Hisashi wished he was home instead of stuck in a meeting about some material negotiations. He was missing his son's birthday party to be here, and that made him more ruthless than normal. His nickname was Hisashi the Dragon, as he wouldn't let a single yen slip through his fingers in a negotiation. His opponents today were not prepared for how much pent-up resentment had accumulated and were thoroughly destroyed as he took the best possible deal for his company. Superb Support System Industries, or SSS Industries, is a good company. The employees do their work efficiently and are treated well and kind. However, as a company run by people, someone inevitably drops the ball, and today that someone hadn't informed Hisashi of a competitor joining the negotiations. He was underprepared for a bidding war between SSS Industries and an American-based company which was famous in Japan for its support to their #1 hero. Hisashi couldn't let his smile slip one bit. If he did, he'd lose momentum in this mental war. Sitting across from Hisashi wasn't just some negotiator, it was two people. One he could understand, a black American gentleman with slightly pointed ears. The other he was purely baffled by, the lead support engineer of Shield Tech, David Shield. "Before we begin, I'd like to address something if possible." The Thai representative nods. giving Hisashi the floor. Might I ask why your lead engineer and current CEO is here, Mr. Alexei? Instead of the negotiator, the unexpected guest himself responds. Ah, that's my fault. I made a bet with Rick to see if he could reach his goal in each negotiation, and he does. I'd have to give him 3 of my PTO days. The scruffy engineer scratched his cheek as he spoke, not making eye contact. If he loses, he has to wear a special tie to next month's negotiations. Hisashi blinked and began to chuckle heartily. He had prepared for a 2-versus-1 negation duel, but now he was purely amused by the dynamic. Rick Alexei gave a slight smirk, confidently saying, "No hard feelings, but I need those days off." Hisashi waves him off. "You've got some rotten luck then, though this doesn't explain why you're here, Mr. Shield. Could you not have reviewed the results?" "Nah, Rick here decided to cheat me out of the lab by making me observe his skills." David narrowed his eyes in Rick's direction, but he wasn't acknowledged. "But what do you mean rotten luck, Mr. Midoriya?" Hisashi gives the man a fierce grin. "I'm currently missing my son's birthday party, so I'll be damned if I give an inch for missing it. No hard feelings, Mr. Alexei, but you'll be wearing that tie." David winced. As a dad, he knew driving force behind Hisashi on a personal level. He placed on Rick's shoulder and shook his head. "Sorry, Rick. Hell hath no fury and all that. Boy, don't write me off like that." Rick looked offended. "Fine, let's see if I can slay the dragon." "Wait, the dragon? What are you talking about?" David looked between the two men, both wearing fierce grins. "It's a nickname I picked up cause of my quirk, fire breathing, and my ferocity. But I agree, let's get started." This marked the first time Hisashi met Rick Alexei and David Shield met on the battlefield of negotiation. A rivalry and friendship which was absolutely packed with duels and bets. Hisashi managed to eke out a victory barely, but a win by the buzzer was a win nonetheless. As he made to shake hands with his opponents, he asked a favor. "Mr. Shield, I was hoping to ask a favor. Actually, two. If you wouldn't mind spending a minute of your time." The dragon looked meek compared to just 5 minutes ago. "I'm going to venture a guess. Is your son a fan of All Might?" David gave a wry smile. This wasn't his first rodeo. "Yes, would you mind a picture and signing 2 things?" Hisashi asked sheepishly. 2, 1 for you." "No, haha, my son's best friend is quite the tinkerer, so I thought to get her something as well given the chance." Hisashi rubbed the back of his head. "The picture is for me to brag about." This got a chuckle from the Shield CEO. "I don't mind. What am I signing and who am I making it out to?" In the suburbs of Jakku, not far from the Midoriya household, a girl with a bloody mouth was getting scolded by her parents. The 2 parents surely meant well in their own way, but to He-Girl she was meant to feel ashamed for how her quirk affected her. She craved blood. She wasn't bothered by it. In fact, she thought the color was pretty. Himiko was ordered to go clean herself up immediately. Upon reaching the bathroom, she stared into the mirror. She felt alone. Her parents had started looking at her strangely after her quirk came in, and now they were almost colder towards her. She continued staring at her reflection when her eyes caught her attention. A thought crossed her mind. "I like your eyes. They're like mine." The image of a boy around her age with fluffy green hair and slitted eyes and slightly sharpened teeth like her was put front and center in her head. The look on his face wasn't disgust like her parents'. He looked interested. A soft smile spread across her face. "Izuku, I think," she thought to herself as she picked leaves and twigs out of her messy hair buns. Chapter 11, Aftermath. Izuku and Mei spent a few hours on repairing the stylophone, playing with the other instruments and writing up blueprints for their school defense system. By dinner time, the 2 had amassed a pile of scrap and paper in the living room. Inko wasn't pleased with the mess they made, but decided to let the kids off lightly by just making them clean up before dinner. Dinner was katsudon, one of Izuku's favorites. Inko watched fondly over her son and his friend as they ate, barely touching her own food. "How is it, you two?" "It's yummy," Mei yells with a mouthful of katsudon threatening to fall out. Izuku instead continued shoveling his favorite food into the seemingly bottomless chasm that is his gullet. Ishiraigu Izuku managed to spray a bit of katsudon back into his bowl, which was promptly eaten like the rest. "Remember, don't speak with your mouths full, you two. Mind your manners," Inko gently reminded the 2, which caused them both to swallow and almost choke. Inko covered her mouth, trying not to laugh as they both scrunched their faces in pain and then reached for their drinks simultaneously. "After dinner you'll be heading to bed. You don't have to sleep, but at least stay in your room. I set up an air mattress for you, or if you want the bed, Izuku can use it." "Thank you, Mrs. Midoriya." Mei smiled a toothy grin, giving a light bow which came off as more of a nod. "Inko dear, Ms. Inko, if you really want to." Mei nodded, clarifying, "Thank you, Ms. Inko." "Of course, honey." Inko smiled, returning to her food. After dinner, the pair got ready for bed, Mei changing into some pajamas with bolts and wrenches on them, while Izuku used the bathroom to change into his All Might pajamas. Mei's pajama sleeves were slightly too long a size or too larger than her. After brushing his teeth, he came back to Mei looking over all of his All Might merchandise. The newest addition, the hoodie which Izuku was thinking about burning, now sitting next to the shelf which had the disguised vials. Izuku panicked a bit. He wasn't sure he'd be able to talk himself out of it if May found the vials. Hey Pink, do you want the mattress or the bed? May turned around, a finger on her chin in contemplation. I would feel bad taking your bed, so I'll take the mattress. Izuku let out an internal sigh, being able to get her to look away from the merchandise. A thought betrays him, however. Would it be so bad if she found out? Izuku shook himself out of that line of thought, knowing that even telling one person about his situation would be a risk. As he focused again, he saw May staring at him almost an inch away from his face. Startled, he let out a yelp and took a step back. What are you thinking about? The pinkette asked, her pupils dilating on Izuku. And nothing. You're making a face. I'm making a face. You're making a face. Izuku presses his hands to his cheeks, trying to figure out what face he was making. You make a lot of faces. Sometimes you look a bit scary. May makes her best scary face to emphasize her point, but her pajamas don't do her any favors. I'm just thinking about stuff. Izuku refuses to meet May's gaze, but this only causes May to push harder. About Bomber the baby killer. I mean, Katsuki. May's penchant for nicknames almost makes Izuku laugh, a smile forcing its way onto his face. Maybe it's just hard. Izuku's smile runs away, replaced by a bitter frown. You made a pretty scary face when you hugged him. I only see that face when you're around Vivani. You don't like Katsuki, do you? May turned, speaking to Izuku as she grabbed his newly signed hoodie. Not really, but I didn't want to make Auntie and Uncle sad, so I gave him a chance. Last time I saw him, he was beating me up cause I triggered an episode of his IED. Dad said blaming him cause of it would make Auntie sad, so I tried, but while Izuku had successfully drawn May's attention from the disguised vial case, he was now talking about something he hadn't really made clear to even his parents. You hate him. May turned back around, the All Might hoodie in hand. Izuku freezes up. He did. He hated Katsuki. He hated that stupid jerk and his stupid nickname. He hadn't wanted to invite him. He didn't want to see him. Izuku slowly nods. I shouldn't, because he was my best friend, and he's sick like me. May cocks her head to the side, a bit confused. He was. But what does that have to do with anything? Izuku could only blank, equally confused. May went on, looking down at the signature on the hoodie. Grandma told me once that hate is too strong an emotion to waste on someone you don't care about. But he was your best friend. Do you care about him? Izuku took a moment to digest her words. Do I still care about Kaken? He had his answer the moment he asked himself. Yes, he did. They did everything together, promised to become heroes together, but he changed after getting his quirk. Until Izuku got his own, he was cruel to him, teasing him and beating on him. Yeah, I do. We made a promise like you and me. May smiled, deciding to give Izuku a hug with the hoodie still in one hand. So it's okay to hate him, so long as you still care about him. May had definitely misunderstood the intent behind her grandmother's words. She has meant this in the case of strangers, or classmates, meaning it was a waste of time to hate someone rather than just let it go. But May had taken this to mean the opposite was also okay, that so long as she cared about someone it was okay to hate them. May wasn't good with emotions and social cues, but in this case her genius guided her to the wrong result. Izuku had always been told to be kind, to stand up for the little guy. He was a heroic little lad, but the opposite was also true. Any resentment was waved off, explained away, or guilted by his parents, even if they had not meant to do so. His parents were refusing a part of his feelings, which often left him feeling like he was the one to blame. May's words gave him an epiphany of sorts. His negative feelings were valid. He hugged her back, resting his chin on her shoulder as he let out a long breath. A tension in him he had been repressing now breaking as he began to cry. I hate him. I didn't want to invite him. He's violent and mean and always yells at me. Izuku hugged May tighter. May now rubbed his back to let him get it all out. She was going to do the same thing he did for her, be a friend. Izuku sniffled lightly as the two sat on the bed, a mirror image of the two only a few days ago. May rubbing Izuku's back as they sat facing away from the pillows. So what do you want to do with this? Also, who's Deku? May nudged the hoodie, knocking it off the bed. Izuku rubbed his nose, sniffling again as he spoke. Katsuki calls me that to make fun of me. I got my quirk later than him, so he kept calling me that even after you got mine. May nodded, understanding the kanji joke after a moment or two. It's a bit clever, surprisingly for him. Wanna blow it up? I think I wanna burn it. Izuku stared at the hoodie, feeling no positive attachment to it despite his love for All Might. Wanna go to the park tomorrow then? Wait, is there one around your house? The pink menace casually agreed to the burning, her lack of safety concerns clear. Katsuki dragged me there earlier. Oh, I saw a girl drinking a bird. Izuku exclaimed excitedly as though drinking a bird was like seeing a shooting star. May, however, stared at the boy like he grew a second head. How do you drink a bird? Did she use a straw? Nope, she was like a vampire. It was really cool. Her eyes were like mine too, but yellow like yours. Izuku pointed to his teeth, then his eyes, remaining enthused as he described a bird-drinking vampire girl to his best friend. Do you think blood tastes should good? Did the pigeon blood taste like chicken nuggets? May began to lose herself in intrusive thoughts as Izuku let something dark slip. Yeah, it tasted pretty good. This caused May to stop and turn to him. Did you drink a bird too? Her face a mixture of exasperation and concern. No, remember when Morioha, Togati, and Vivani beat me up? Well, I bit Morioha to get him off me. And he tasted surprisingly good. May was a bit bitter about that whole thing, but she knew she couldn't change what happened. So, what did it taste like? Have you ever licked a battery? Or sucked on a coin? Kinda like that. May nodded thoughtfully in response. She was no stranger to those examples. A lot of her thoughts were intrusive, often using her quirk to look at things she shouldn't without getting caught. I wonder if she'll be there tomorrow. I hope so. Izuku laid back on the bed, exhausted from the day and his crying. Luckily, he hadn't gained his mother's pension for flooding a room with tears yet, so he hadn't wet his floor or bed. His eyes fluttered between open and closed. The room soon filled with soft snoring. May struggled between the choice of moving Izuku so she could get off the bed or staying there. She sighed as she stared down at the fluffy-haired boy now sleeping, his hand gripping her baggy sleeve. She laid back with him, staring at her friend sleeping softly. She thought to herself, "Green, the big dummy." After cleaning up, texting a few people and making sure the tinkering sets were put away neatly, Ko headed upstairs to tuck her son in for the night. Instead, after cracking the door open to see the two friends sharing the bed and sleeping on top of the covers, she smiled to herself, grabbing a spare comforter from her bedroom closet and sneaking into her son's room to ensure the friends didn't catch a cold. As she began pulling the cover over them, she noticed her son's hand and face. He was clutching May's sleeve even asleep, while he had slightly puffy red eyes and faint tear lines on his cheek. Ko felt a pit in her stomach seeing this. She turned to grab the All Might hoodie the Bakugos gifted him, but then paused reading the sign. To Deku, you can do it plus ultra. All Might, Deku, she muttered to herself. She picked it up and held it closer, thinking on the word, soon remembering that Katsuki had called her son that. She had also seen a look on Izuku's face she couldn't quite place. It looked like he was angry or perhaps disgusted at Katsuki. Looking back at her son, seeing the tear lines, she felt the pit in her stomach grow. She looked for a place to put the hoodie. She opened a drawer at the bottom of Izuku's dresser to find all manner of broken things. Each All Might related, well, most of them. She was confused. She instead closed it and instead laid the hoodie on the shelf next to an almost billboard-style All Might placard. She turned to the sleeping pair once more and then left, her thoughts a bit jumbled by what she saw. What isn't Izu telling me? He'd tell me if something was wrong, right? The next morning, the dynamic duo, after a breakfast filled with pancakes and so many chocolate chips that May was cut off, the two grabbed the cart her dad used to cart the gifts over and dragged it upstairs. So why do we need this? They asked, pulling through the door. Well, I have some other stuff I want to burn. And if we're careful, I can use this to test my quirk too. Izuku opened the drawer he hid the destroyed merchandise he broke after a fit of rage over Bakugo. He had originally thrown it in his trash but decided to keep it after a talk he and his dad had. After filling the cart, dropping a blanket over it and putting some tinkering materials on top of it, the two slowly wheeled it back downstairs to the door. And what's this? Izuku's mom peered over at the pair as the cart went thunk 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 down the stairs. Testing. We want to make things that won't be a good idea in the house. May smiled, not technically lying as she did want to work on some stuff while at the park. Izuku nodded, smiling with May. Oh, and where do you plan on testing? Ko raised an eyebrow at the admittedly strangely smiling kids, both having no concept of a poker face. The park. Well, away from the park. Don't want to hit anyone. Izuku quickly added, trying not to sound suspicious but only adding to Ko's suspicions. Now Ko knew the kids were being shady, but she also trusted her son enough to know that he wasn't going to do something extremely dangerous, only that he'd likely get yelled at for whatever he was doing. All right, you have your phone. You know the way. Be safe, and if anyone suspicious approaches you, call me immediately. I'll drive over to pick you up. Izuku and May nodded before heading out the door without a second thought. Ko let them off lightly, deciding it'd be a good chance to look at what Izuku had in that drawer. She was, however, disappointed as she found it empty, the hoodie gone too. She concluded the pair were going to throw it all away in a trash can at the park. Cursing herself for her actions, she could only wait to ask her son after May left later that evening. Izuku began unloading the cart onto the ground. The two had found a small clearing beyond the bushes in the park. May went around clearing the area of any things that could catch fire, marking a circle in the center for them to place things. You've told me a bit about your quirk, but not much. It's flame breath, flame eating, and regenerating? May asked while removing the blanket from the cart to uncover the All Might gear. But I can also eat explosions. Izuku took a small sheet of metal and placed it in the circle May drew. So it's not flame eating, it's energy eating. May paused, remembering when Izuku put baby number 3 in his mouth to keep it from exploding. Yeah, I think. I always feel a warmth whenever I eat something, and it goes away when I exhale flames. Izuku then takes a broken All Might action figure and places it on the sheet. So does that mean you store energy? Mei takes a pair of sunglasses out for herself and hands one to Izuku. Probably. I think my regeneration is powered by it too. This for the baseline, right? Izuku takes the sunglasses and flicks a stylus around his fingers, his phone now in his other hand horizontally. Yup, just set it on fire, Mei exclaims, doing a double take for a moment. I didn't see him take that out. Izuku, without any fanfare, takes a deep breath and from a few feet away exhales onto the figure. Green flames setting the metal sheet and the figurine ablaze. Within a few seconds the figure is melting, a small trail of green smoke coming from it. Izuku, seeing this, decides to try to eat the flames before the thin metal sheet takes any damage. Izuku focuses on the flame and inhales, an indescribable taste filling his mouth. The green flames telekinetically moving to the boy's mouth. Izuku can't help but mimic chewing while the flames make his body warm. Mei watches with dilating eyes, burning the detail of it into her mind for the sake of the experiment. At what distance can you suck up the flames? Mei starts inspecting the damage. Noting that the flames did more damage than she thought it would, the metal plate having a radius around the toy where it was almost carved out. I don't know, I haven't tested. Izuku lines up the next test subject, backing away to test a shot instead of a spray. I want to see if I can make a smaller shot. Mei nods, moving behind him as he finishes his notes. Izuku inhales, this time keeping his mouth shut to try to pressurize the flames before letting it all out in one puff. The flames seem to have condensed, hitting the new target and knocking it off the metal sheet. The toy makes a small trail of flames as it tumbles and stops. Though you can do single shots which have a bit of kick to them. Do you think it's pressure or your saliva? Mei smiles, getting close to Izuku, focusing on his mouth. Come, let's test it out. Izuku walks to one of the small flames burning the ground and spits on it. The flame becomes smaller and a darker green, suggesting the flames solidify in contact with his spit. Note to self, try this on normal flames next. Your quirk is weird. It's got so much going for it and is almost complicated in its mechanism. Izuku tries his best not to react to that, knowing that Mei is at her most observant when testing. I wish I brought a lighter, I want to tear the difference in flames. Izuku turns to Mei with a half-hearted frown which Mei smirks at. Have no fear, I figured this would come up. I brought all the necessary tools to make an electric lighter. We have cloth so we can use that. Mei's grin grows bolder as she fishes through the stuff they brought for a battery and some wiring, quickly making a spark plug of sorts. The ever-prepared Hatsume Mei, Izuku remarks as he consumes the flames he just made. The more solid flame coming to his mouth much slower than the rest. Sacrifices speed of consumption for punch, it seems. Agreed. Anyhow, wanna burn your All Might hoodie? Izuku nods, sitting the hoodie in the plate. Hold on. Mei takes the hoodie and begins cutting it in half. We're gonna time them both. First is normal fire. Mei backs away. Half the hoodie, which years later may have been worth a small fortune, over her shoulder like a towel. Izuku takes the spark plug. After counting down, he lights it. After a few minutes, the fire goes out on its own. The half of the hoodie fairly burned, but not completely so. Izuku removes the half and tosses it to the side while Mei replaces the other. Izuku repeats the process. However, after a minute, the fire has yet to go out, the flame burning until the entire half was gone, no ash remaining. The green smoke hovering in the air weighs up, collecting together instead of dispersing. I wonder why there aren't any ashes. Izuku stares at the smoke, deciding to step even further back than before and inhale once more. Though it does take more time, Izuku notices the green smoke makes him feel warmer than either the fire or his fire. So, your flames are probably not normal flames since they don't really go out like normal fire. Maybe its fuel is different than normal flames, Mei asks, trying to talk through her ideas. No ashes, so does that mean it doesn't waste? Plus, the smoke felt warmer than the fire and it started to coalesce after a bit. Maybe it would solidify after a while. Izuku writes some of these thoughts into his phone for later use. So how do you feel after burning the hoodie? Mei asks, breaking their previous line of dialogue. Izuku puts a hand to his chin, mulling over the question. About the same. I think I feel better after last night in general. Thanks, Pink. Izuku gives Mei an embarrassed smile, while Mei extends her arm into a thumbs up. No problem, Green. What are friends for? Izuku's smile turns a bit broader. He nods in full agreement. Now, we have more things to burn. Quirk, Hydra Flame. This quirk seems to absorb energy, not just fire. The flames it generates converts matter into energy fairly efficiently, leaving little to no waste behind. The newly converted energy tends to collect together for ease of absorption for the user. It is noted that the user's body stores the energy it consumes for later use, a sense of heat being the measure of said energy. Kinetic energy seems to also be absorbed in the mouth at point-blank range, likely a side effect of gene therapy with a shock-absorbing quirk mixed in. Chapter 12, An Encounter with a Vampire. Izuku and Mei finished their notably illegal quirk experiments and were about to leave when Izuku noticed a pair of familiar eyes peeking around a tree. The small girl with messy blonde buns and yellow cat eyes warily stared at the two fire scientists. Izuku met her eyes and waved hesitantly with a small smile, causing the girl to pull back behind the tree. "What are you looking at?" Mei asked, looking in the same direction. She stared and stared, finally training her eyes on a pair of hands on the side of a tree. "Someone hiding?" Izuku nodded, whispering to his friend. "It's the girl, the one with the bird." Mei put her fist in her hand in realization. "Just don't scare her, I want to talk to her." Mei raised a finger in protest but lowered it, knowing she wouldn't win that argument. "Toga." The girl peered around the tree, hearing her name. She didn't say anything, but she was staring at Mei. Mei, of course, the picture of good decisions, as she decides to smile and wave enthusiastically. This of course causes the girl to hide again and Izuku to look at Mei expressionlessly. The greenette lets out a sigh and juts his thumb toward Mei. "This is my best friend Hatsume. She's a bit enthusiastic, but she's nice. Did you want to talk with me?" "I'm very nice," Mei mutters to herself, which earns her a head of ruffled hair courtesy of Izuku. "You can stay there, but I will ask you not tell anyone what we did. We'll get yelled at if you do." Himiko leans to the side to look at the pair, nodding in confirmation, grabbing the sleeves of her sweater to calm her nerves. "She does have eyes like you, Green. I think they're cat though." Mei was staring at Himiko and using her quirk to get a detailed one at that. This remark causes Himiko to snap her focus to Mei, which causes her to inhale sharply upon noticing Mei's eyes. "Yours are yellow, like mine." Himiko continues to stare at Mei and Mei back at her. Izuku ponders what he should do before nodding to himself and spreading the blanket they had on the group and sitting. "Wanna come sit with us? I'd like to talk with you if you'd let me." Izuku pat the ground across from him, then turned to Mei and gestured for her to sit. "Oh, okay." Himiko slowly walked over, looking nervous but coming over despite this. Holding her skirt down, she kneels down and sits across from the pair. "How about we reintroduce ourselves? I'm Midoriya Izuku." Izuku gestures to himself and then looks to Mei for her to continue the trend. "I'm Hatsume. It's nice to meet you." Himiko looked a bit timid before, but a bit of tension was slowly leaving her. "I'm Toga." Himiko, the cat-eyed girl, looked between the pair as if waiting for something to happen. "Yup, still awkward. How about our favorite colors? Or something? I'm really bad at making friends." Izuku laughs self-deprecatingly, causing Mei to give a wry smile. "My favorite color is purple, and I like learning things." "Mount's favorite color is black. Wait, maybe gold?" "One of the two." "My favorite food is chocolate." Mei has to hold herself back from getting closer, but her enthusiasm does leak out a bit. Himiko spoke softly, almost ashamed of what she was about to say. "My favorite color is red, and I like climbing trees." "I don't know how to climb a tree. Would you teach me sometime?" Izuku smiled, which got him a small smile in return and a nod. Himiko, now a bit more relaxed, decides to ask a question of her own. "Why were you burning things?" Izuku does his best to word his answer to properly explain, while Mei just outright answers. Green was burning stuff from someone he hates and testing his quirk at the same time. "I was helping." The cheerfully blunt girl says it like the act was completely normal. "You hide your quirk?" Himiko asks, a bit hopeful to find someone like her. "I don't think it's the same as you think. I was hiding using the quirk cause it's illegal." "Sorry." Izuku didn't want to mislead Himiko, so he cleared it up before any confusion could occur, which caused Himiko to deflate a bit. "Do you need to hide yours, Toga?" Mei asks, the question causing Himiko to startle a bit, her eyes turning to the ground and a sad look covering her face. "Mom and Dad say I'm not normal, so I have to hide my quirk." Izuku and Mei nodded in understanding, both wearing frowns of recognition to those words. Mei was often called a freak by her bullies, even to this day. While she could try to ignore them, words still hurt when you're told over and over. Izuku, however, felt the connection on a different wavelength, his constant need to hide his other quirks making him feel a bit guilty and alone. "Who cares about normal? Normal is boring. I'd rather interesting people like Green be around me than some butt faces." Mei forces a smile, she reeling from her own thoughts, but she wanted to help this girl in any way she could. She owed it to someone made to feel bad like she was. "Agreed. If being a butt face is normal, then I think I'd rather be weird." Izuku concurred. He looked over to his friend and put a hand on hers, squeezing it lightly before turning to the sound of sniffles. Himiko was touched. Her parents had been her only real relationship and she couldn't be herself at all. She felt these cravings for blood, but she was scolded and even hit if she didn't push it down. She looked between the two as tears began to fall. These were words she needed to hear. Not from them, but from her parents. However, she didn't think she'd ever hear them come from two complete strangers. Mei hugged Himiko. The girl was tense at first but melted into it. A soft purring sound began to emanate from her as she leaned her head against Mei. Izuku came up to the two and joined the hug, patting the crying girl on the head softly. Himiko, would you like to be our friend? Mei was the one to ask. Ever since Izuku had promised to stay her friend, she had become more confident and resolute. She'd do what Izuku did for her for Toga, and she'd try at least. Himiko pulled back slightly, but began crying even harder, nodding all the while. It took a while for the girl to calm down enough to speak again, but Mei abs Izuku weren't bothered by it. Izuku seemed to be lost in thought over something. If I'm green and you're pink, what's Toga going to be? Izuku asked Mei, who was still holding Himiko protectively. Green, pink, Himiko questioned, only to be ignored as Mei spoke. I know, yellow. Mei raised her hand excitedly, a now confused Himiko leaning against her. Her hair is blonde though. Mei frowned hearing this rebuttal. Yeah, but blonde doesn't fit the color motif. Plus her eyes are yellow. Mei countered, but Izuku struck back again. So are yours. Toga, what do you think? Izuku looked to their newly adopted friend for her take. Himiko, call me Himiko or Himi. But I think yellow is fine. Mei is already pink, so I think it's okay. Himiko did her best to keep up, though getting used to the duo's quick banter was going to take some time. See, it's settled. Yellow, welcome to the group. Mei hugged Himiko tighter and smiled without a care in the world. Izuku stared at the two fondly, a question raising in his mind. Himi, where do you go to school? Himiko, who had been smiling a moment ago, straightened up. Mom said I can't go back until my cravings go away. Himiko looked ashamed, but Izuku nodded in understanding. Was the bird not enough? Himiko looked to Mei in fear, realizing she didn't know about her previous meal. Oh, don't worry, Pink already knows about that. Sorry. She's my best friend and I had to share. Izuku bowed slightly, but Himiko was just relieved, her fear now gone as soon as it came. Himiko looked to Izuku and shook her head. It's okay, but not enough. It's not right. Mei cocked her head to the side and glanced to Himiko. What is your quirk? Mei as usual asked hard-hitting questions as though it made no difference. Blood drinking. At this, Izuku shook his head in disagreement. Hearing Himiko's quirk, he knew it wasn't a simple mutation quirk with a drawback. It had some element to it that copied similar to the vials. Have you drank a person's blood yet? Izuku asked, which got a hesitant shake of the head from Himiko and a look of aha from Mei. Then drink mine. I think your quirk is trying to tell you how to use it. Himiko looked baffled by the offer. She had just met them and had just become their friend. No normal person would offer that. Oh right, no normal person would. Himiko smiled to herself, Mei nodding in agreement. We came here to test quirks, so might as well test yours too. Izuku crawled over to the pair. Peeling Himiko away from Mei much to the latter's displeasure, he put up his wrist for her to bite. Himiko, however, hesitated to bite her new friend. Izuku, seeing this, decided to help further. Much to Mei's horror, Izuku bit into his arm just before the wrist, which caused him to bleed profusely. The taste of iron filling his mouth once more, Izuku let out a soft exhale. The pain was intense, but he found a sense of clarity in it, while the oddly satisfying taste of his own blood permeated his mouth. Himiko recovered from her shock as soon as she saw the blood, her cat-like eyes changing to those of a predator. The girl grabbed Izuku's arm and began letting the blood drip into her mouth. The taste was sweet to her, and soon the urges she felt waned far more than they had from the birds. In fact, her craving felt like it had gone completely, replaced by a calm satisfaction. As she gulped down the blood, she felt it stay somewhere near her stomach. A faint bloated sensation stuck around, feeling more and more like an empty stomach she hadn't known she had. Soon enough, the blood stopped flowing as Izuku's wound closed over, leaving Himiko to lick his arm for the last of it. Izuku couldn't help but giggle at the rough sensation on his arm. He had been told cats had rough tongues, so he imagined they felt similar. With his wound healed, he looked to Mei, who was a bit pale. Having no experience with blood, she wasn't super comfortable with the fact her friend just bled out into her new friend's mouth. Sorry, Mei. I didn't mean to startle you. This snapped Himiko out of her trance and caused her to look at Mei in fear. Mei was pale, but thankfully for Himiko, she wasn't showing a sign of disgust, just worry. Himiko let out a sigh as Mei crawled over and began wailing on Izuku, her arms raining pops onto his head in righteous fury. Warn me when you're gonna maim yourself. My heart can't take you getting hurt anymore. Mei continued to whack Izuku until he apologized. She then huffed and turned to Himiko. So how was that yellow? Feel any better? Himiko nods, smiling brightly for the first time since she arrived. Where are my sunglasses? Mei had to look away from a moment but nodded to herself in satisfaction. All right, sadly we have to go. But I'll be sure to visit the park whenever I come over Green's place. Oh, do you have a phone? Himiko frowned and looked like she was going to cry again. Don't worry, Yellow. Pink and I will build you one if you can't afford one. Right, Pink? Izuku nudged Mei, who was already muttering to herself about the design. Can't promise anything fancy though. Izuku chuckled before standing up. He offered a hand to Himiko to help get up, which she took. Izuku gave her a quick hug before pulling Mei up while she was doing some rough calculations in the dirt. This snapped her out of the baby creation trance she often got into, which she promptly hugged Himiko after. Afternoons after school, except Mondays. Izuku has his gene therapy on Mondays. With that, Mei broke away from Himiko and began packing anything else they needed to. Himiko nodded and clutched her hands to her sides, trying not to be upset at them leaving. "Bye, Yellow. We'll see you Tuesday," Mei shouted as she began walking. Izuku quickly turning and giving Himiko a pat on the head. "See you, Himi. I hope you'll get to join us in school soon." Himiko smiled at the thought and gave one big nod. "Bye, Pink. Bye, Green. Thank you." With that, Himiko, Izuku, and Mei all went their separate ways. When the gremlin duo got back to Izuku's place, they were greeted by a scarily smiling Inko who had tried to text them to see where they were but had gotten no response. The two were made to kneel with books on their heads for their lack of communication until Mei's mother came to get her. Inko decided to broach the subject of the All Might merchandise and the hoodie over dinner. She was expecting Izuku to dodge the question or outright deny it as she hadn't caught him, but to her surprise he didn't. "Oh, Mei and I took it for target practice and testing." Inko raised an eyebrow at that. He hadn't quite answered completely, but it was a start. "And why was some of it broken?" Izuku looked a bit guilty at that, but he had decided to answer anyway. "When we first moved in, I was really angry at Katsuki, so I threw it all away. But after talking with Dad at the dinner, I felt bad and tried to hide it. I'm sorry." Izuku looked down in penance. Inko had a hard time getting upset at him for that, but she still had to set him straight. "Was Katsuki bullying you, Izuku?" Inko frowned, now asking a hard question. She wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer, but she had to at least ask. Izuku paused, staring down at the table and his empty plate. He hadn't told his mom what Katsuki had been doing to him, the teasing, the name-calling, or the beatings. He didn't want her to worry. He didn't want her and Auntie to fight about it. But now, Izuku didn't meet his mother's gaze. Instead, he let his thoughts simmer a bit. He thought back to the few months between him being diagnosed as quirkless and meeting Mr. Shigaraki. They were not fun, to say the least. Inko knew the answer to her question before she asked it. She could feel it, but she didn't want to admit it. She was already upset about how Katsuki acted at the party yesterday. Had she known this, she wouldn't have invited him at all. She was hurt her son didn't tell her, but she also let her son think that he mattered less to her than he did. She wasn't sure how to feel. She knew she was going to cry, but if she did, she wouldn't be able to correct her son properly. She bit her lower lip and closed her eyes, letting her emotions wash over her. She let out a small sigh. "Just so you know, Izu, you can tell me these things. I don't want you to think you have to hide it from me. Hell, you can tell your dad too. We're your parents. Regardless of who's involved, we're here for you. You are my priority. I know you didn't want to hurt Suki and my relationship, but you're too young to be worried about that kind of thing. I didn't want you to be upset," Izuku muttered, a slightly pained look on his face. "I'm more upset that you were hiding it, Izu. It's not okay to lie to people about things. But it's also not okay to take abuse for no reason." "Okay." Izuku nodded. He knew she was right and had been feeling bad about lying, not just about this but his quirks too. "Now go upstairs. No cake for you. And only get ready for bed." Inko couldn't stay too upset with him. He had been afraid of getting in trouble. Hopefully he wouldn't do such a thing again. "I'm disappointed in myself more than I am in you. I love you, but please rely on me and your dad in the future." Izuku did as his mother told him, with one exception. He took the 2 vials of quirks from their hidden case. He took Encyclopedia, which aided his memory, and absorbed it into his body. After a clicking feeling and this amorphous object going into him, he felt his mind become oddly widened. The difference like a fogged road versus a clear day. He could remember things with absolute clarity. He turned to the other vial, which let off a static sound only he could hear. He stuck a transformed finger inside, the quirk traveling down it into his head. He began to feel different frequencies, almost like thoughts in his head. It was overwhelming. He decided to lay down and try to sort through them, the mental strain starting to get to him a bit. Luckily, he had prepared by reading about radio waves and used that knowledge to imagine a radio being tuned to a frequency. He slowly acclimated to the quirk, allowing him to focus and change the frequency he focused on. He even attempted to produce one himself, though it was sloppy. Izuku quickly tired himself out, falling to unconsciousness quickly after tuning into a radio station. Inko couldn't hold it in any longer. She sat at the table and began to cry frustrated tears. She slumped over, leaning onto the table into her own arms, her thoughts whirling around inside her head. She needed someone to talk to. She wanted to talk to Suki, but she knew her friend was struggling with her own issues regarding Katsuki and she couldn't pile them on top of it. She decided to call Hisashi instead. She didn't want to bother him with it while he was away, but she couldn't take it. All the while, Himiko got ready for bed at her own home. She stared at herself in the mirror once more, a smile forming on her lips as she thought about her new friends. They were kind, understanding, and didn't try to tell her she was wrong. She imagined their faces and wished that she could be as cool as them, as kind as them, and as free as them. Her eyes closed. Himiko felt her body tense up and felt like she was forced to put on another set of clothes. She opened her eyes to see Izuku staring back at her. She blinked in surprise, thinking he was here for a moment, then noticed the reality. He put up her hand to her cheek, the sensation the same, but the hands different. She was wearing the same clothes, but some other clothes were wrapped over them. She spoke hesitantly. Her voice was Izuku's as well. Whoa, is this my quirk? Himiko stared at herself in the mirror, admiring the face and noticing how similar they truly were. The eyes and teeth were almost the exact same. She felt a sense of comfort as she looked into his eyes, then remembered where she was and began to panic. How long was she going to be Izuku? Can she turn back? Will she be able to do it again? She took a deep breath and focused on her face, removing that second layer she felt. All at once her form met a lead, revealing her face as this sludge-like stuff fell from her and hit the bathroom floor. It didn't stain her clothes, it was just messy looking, so she took a towel and cleaned it up. Now she had something to share with Pink and Green.